In the middle of the darkness of the king's chamber, I saw all these people coming out of the stones. They surrounded us. They're about 8.5 feet tall, dressed in this beautiful white satin. And they referred to themselves as Shining Ones, Watchers. And they actually did appear in Earth's history 12,000 years ago. The Watchers and the Shining One, they all have different names around the world. And they stopped arriving in human form because they said, and I quote, "We got tired of being crucified." My arms are floating. Oh, both my arms are floating. And suddenly I can't feel the ground beneath me. I'm literally floating above the crop circle. And I remember seeing 3 people on either side dressed exactly the same way that I found in the Great Pyramid. It's the same technology that was going into crop circles, was the same stuff that was behind Stonehenge, pyramids, Pumapunku, Sacsayhuaman, except they were using very large rocks. The sacred sites are alive. It's a bit like going into a computer. And if you do anything that's untoward, or even prayer, the site remembers. There are other speeches out there that are saying, well, whatever happens on Earth and whatever direction that they take will also affect the decisions that we make, because we're all connected at some level. And whatever we decide to do will have repercussions through time and space.
So you are Freddy Silva. You are a best-selling author, researcher. How many books have you written?
God, that's a good question. I think I've written 8 plus 1, which is a sort of a self-help book.
Okay.
So we'll call it 8 plus 1.
All right. Fantastic. Fantastic. You are an explorer of ancient civilizations, sacred sites, alternative history, and for more than 2 decades, you've traveled the world and kind of explored the interplay between consciousness and sacred geometry, amongst other things. I know crop circles was something that you were big into. Well, I guess that's been a while now.
Originally, yeah.
Yeah, but originally that's...
and the Knights Templar are in there as well.
Yep.
And the funny thing is, Matt, everything's connected.
Yep.
All of those topics are actually connected.
Very cool.
And I didn't see it coming 25 years ago, which is half the fun.
Yep. Well, very good. Well, where is a great place to start? Where's like a, something that we can wow the audience with right off of the bat?
I was writing a book called Portals, which I actually didn't want to write. It was actually for a publisher. And I want to take a year off. There's a point where you start writing noise. And there's a lot of noise out there in this kind of world, and I don't want to contribute to the noise. If I've got nothing to say, I'm not going to say it until I have something that it needs to be said, and it's going to affect a lot of people. But I was approached by a publisher, and they said, well, look, why don't you talk about your personal experiences? Because you talk about them, but you've never written them down. And I thought, actually, that might be kind of interesting, but is anybody actually interested? And they said, you bet. I mean, everyone's dying to hear about all the stuff that's happened to you over 30 years. And I thought, okay, if people are interested, I guess I should write it down. So I guess 2 experiences which I think were very relevant to this work, because I didn't see them coming. One of them was my first trip into the Great Pyramid, back when I was a neophyte, just sort of, a piece of chewing gum on the back of an Egyptologist's shoe, learning the ropes. I had some great teachers, John Michel, the antiquarian of Britain, who wrote some of the best books on ancient systems of knowledge. So when you got people like that who are basically, showing you the ropes of how things are, you can only go wrong if you really mess it up. Okay, so I don't really know where I'm going with all of this. I just know that I work with a group of people who go around sacred sites fixing the problems that they leave there, by which I mean the sacred sites are alive. The rocks are full of quartz. It's a bit like going into a computer. And if you do anything that's untoward, or even prayer, the site remembers. So everything is in the building. Sometimes a lot of people go to the Great Pyramid and they leave a lot of negative stuff there for whatever reason. So it's our job to go around and clean up this mess, reset the stage to back where it used to be, and just let things fall where they may. And I didn't expect this to happen. And this is, and I have to preempt this story. I didn't know what was about to happen was possible. I wasn't expecting anything to happen. I'm just going there to be of service, to help clean the place up, put a little bit of prayer into the king's chamber. And in the middle of the darkness of the king's chamber, because the lights went out, and there's only 4 of us in there, I saw all these people coming out of the stones, as clearly as I'm seeing you right now. And they surrounded us. There's about 30 people. They're about 8.5 feet tall, dressed in this beautiful white satin, or what looks like white satin to our eyes. And that was the day I quit my day job, when I realized I've touched something here in this building by my intention of being in this particular room, which is very important. And I've interacted with something here which I didn't know was even possible. And what's going on here? Of course, what was going on here begins the story of where I am now, 30 years later, writing a book about the very people who came out of the woodwork, so to speak. And they referred themselves as Shining Ones, Watchers, and they actually did appear in Earth's history 12,000 years ago as the Followers of Horus. The Shining Ones. They appear all around the world, and they seem to be responsible for the development of human civilization in different pockets around the world. So that was one of the most important things that happened in my life in terms of interacting with sacred space and understanding where the story of sacred space comes from and why they built buildings back then that were going to withstand the test of time. Because that's one of the big questions we always ask ourselves is why use huge rocks? Why not use bricks and make it easier for yourself? Well, because when you have very, very large rocks, they're going to withstand, hopefully, meteorite strikes, but certainly earthquakes, tidal waves, anything else that human folly can throw at it. So that when we're sitting here in this room asking these questions about where ancient civilization comes from, where the wisdom comes from, who put it there, who built the temples that we love so well, we can go back to these places today because they still survive. So that, I think, is one of the most important things that happened in my life, because it got me literally to quit my day job, and because I realized that something of huge benefit here to society. If this is what's happening to me, and I wasn't expecting it, and I wasn't asking for this, it's going to happen to other people, and it's going to hopefully change their lives also for the better.
Incredible. Let's pause on it real quick and kind of dive deep into what actually happened and paint the picture for us. So you're in the King's Chamber. You're there with 3 other people.
Yeah.
And the lights go out.
Yeah, we're part of a group of 16 people, but for some reason there was a snafu with the ticketing, and we couldn't get private access either. It was just one of those things. And I'm there with my fearless, glorious psychic teacher, a lady called Isabel Kingston, who works with the British police to solve a lot of their crimes, even though that's not really publicly announced, because the police don't want you to know that they're using a trance medium with an incredible gift to help them with their serious crimes. And she's got a near 100% record of doing things. So that's the group I was involved with. And so they couldn't get into the building. Only 4 of us managed to get in. And there's people running up and down the building. And if you've been there, you know how beautifully tuned the Grand Gallery is. I mean, you drop a pin, it's like dropping a ton of bricks inside the building. It's a cacophony of sounds. Everything's so beautifully vibrational in that room. And we got up to the King's Chamber, and there's kids running around. And I'm looking at the other 3 guys, and I said, "Is this why we came here?" I'm starting to feel really annoyed. And the moment I said that, everybody left the building. Literally, the whole building was empty. And in the middle of the day in Giza, that doesn't happen. And then the lights went out. And I thought, that shouldn't be happening. Maybe we overstayed our welcome. And one of the guys said, "Well, look, you're the one that's done this before, and you know how to tone the building. So you basically figure out the resonance of a room and try to put back the note into the room that belongs there. It's a bit like if the room is out of balance, you're trying to put the note that's missing in the room to restore it to its perfect balance. So it's a practice called toning. It happens all around the world. And so we began the toning in the dark. And there's voices coming out of us that I've never heard coming out of me or the guys in the room. It was the most wonderful melody. I don't know where it was coming from, but that's when all of these people suddenly came out of the stones and surrounded us. And it was a wonderful moment, because I'm toning and I'm looking at darkness with these luminous beings, and they're sort of bowing, and I'm bowing as well. And in the back of my mind, I'm going, I've got so many questions to ask, and I don't feel afraid at all. I know exactly what's happening, but I can't explain it. And then, about 5-10 minutes later, the lights come back on, and there's 3 guys that I'm looking at, and they look shocked, and none of us wants to say anything because we're all trying to be guy. Something's happened to all of us. We've all experienced it, but no one wants to say a thing. So there's a very excitable Arab voice at the bottom of the building shouting, and I thought, you know what? I think that wasn't meant to happen. I think we should take turns going into the box. I won't call it a sarcophagus by any means. We took turns going into the box for about 5 minutes each just to get a sense of what it was like. And we left, went down the building, came outside, and there's the rest of the group waiting for us. And we're in shock. And I just turned to one of the guys and I said, did anybody see what I saw up there? And the next guy picks up the story, says, yeah, there's a bunch of people that came out of the stones. Yeah, and they were about 8 feet tall. Yeah, and they were dressed in this incredible long white gowns or luminous gowns. And I said, okay, so we all saw this in complete darkness. And then the shock comes back in because you realize something incredible has happened. And so we walk towards our glorious, fearless leader, and we're totally silent. We can't explain what just happened. And she looked at us and said, so, we decided to check in on you while you were in there doing your work, and we realized that you went there to do the work as you were meant to be doing. You honored the building. And did you enjoy being greeted by the guardians of the building? We said nothing to this person. And I said to her, that really happened? And she goes, of course it bloody well happened. Why do you think we're doing this work? And that's when the penny sinks in, that you've connected with something greater than yourself. And the building really is alive. It still has the memory of the people that built it in the first place. So that's pretty much what happened in that one momentous day when I quit my day job.
And that interaction with them, what was there communication? Was there talking? Was there information exchanging? What happened? What was that like?
I didn't realize it at the time, and I realize it now in hindsight, that most of the work that I've done since then has been, with their backing, no. It's been supported by this group of people. The Watchers and the Shining Ones form part of this ancient civilization, this parallel culture that existed here before the Ice Age. And every culture on the planet talks about them, whether they are the Followers of Horus, the Shining Ones, the Lords of Anu, or the Anunnaki, or the Anunnaga, or the Viracochas, the people of the Serpent. They all have different names around the world, but they form part of the same culture. And they stopped arriving in human form because they said, and I quote, we got tired of being crucified because they were much different to human beings. And
so they said this while you were interacting with them?
In the channeling that we got afterwards, because all of this was non-verbal communication. But when we got back to England, we did a session, and it came through Isabel as a trance medium, because I was asking them about the people that we encountered, and they began to explain their actions, and they said, yeah, we'll be guiding people to write about our history. You'll be finding out more about us. I didn't realize they're addressing me out of a group of 26 people. So my work has essentially followed a kind of pattern that's based on me uncovering what they have been doing for the last 12,000 years in terms of our civilization. I didn't realize that at the time. So for me, it's actually very self-validating because I'm not making it up from my own imagination. Someone's been guiding me at the back of, I can go into libraries, I can do research, I can go into buildings, I go up and down pyramids, but I never realized that there was also a super consciousness behind me, kind of like a guardian angel watching my back and feeding me bits of information, which I'd then pick up as imagination, ideas, or inspiration, and then I go and research it. I go and find science behind it. I back it up with real hard facts. I didn't realize that connection until about halfway through my writing career, that they've been guiding me all along.
Okay, so there wasn't really any direct communication or information exchanged while you were in that room with them.
No, it was mostly sort of non-verbal.
Okay,
because I began to write like a lunatic afterwards, and I was a writer to begin with anyway. But the way that the information was coming out was so unstructured, unparalleled, and also improvised. It was just inspired writing. I didn't know where this stuff was coming from. It was coming from everywhere. But somehow it seemed to make sense. It's just that you had to put it into the right boxes to make sure there's a certain logical pattern through it.
And the other three people, were they from Britain as well? Have you kept up with the other three people that were in the room?
Oh yeah, very much. Yeah, they're also part of the same group, and the foundation of the group really is to work on spiritual self-development. Basically, take the person that you are, the imperfect person that you've become, and try to become the person you came here to be. So basically, I think you can call it a spiritual group. We try to develop techniques whereby we develop our natural abilities of becoming much more intuitive and more psychic. We can all do it. It's just that, our parents or our friends, when we were young, will hit you on the back of the head and say, "No, Freddie, you're not seeing fairies." And I'm going, "But I can see them." And then, you get put to the side of society and you forget about the fairies and you go off and be a rock star or graphic designer or whatever. So this is what the group is really about. It's about developing the self and all those things that came with you into this world that you can then go off and apply. It's a bit like Plato. He also said the same thing. His experience of what he calls the other world through a process called incubation, which is a type of an initiation process where you take a poison and you leave the body, you physically leave the body for several days and come back into the body, having been on the other side and remembering everything that you've seen. And he said, the experience helped to shape my metaphysical doctrine, and it gave him a certain insight into the spirituality of human beings. And Pythagoras did it too, and Leonardo da Vinci. All of these people came from exactly the same position where they experienced something. They joined a specific group, whether it was the Rosicrucians, the Knights Templar, the Invisible Brotherhood. They all had different names doing exactly the same thing. And they developed their innate abilities, and they went on to become the great people that they were.
So 8 feet tall, and how many were there, and what other features did you notice about them?
That's the weird thing. Every time I've come across them over the last 30 years, and I've met them several times over the last 30 years, they always have a cowl right down to here. You can't see below the edge of the nose. You can see the mouth. And they're about 8.5 feet tall. And there's actually a description in the temple of Karnak in Egypt that actually talks about these exact beings. They refer to them as the Ahau. It's a nickname. And it says the initiate should stand up with the Ahau or stand up to the level of the Ahau. So it's a metaphor. But they give the actual description of 8.5 feet tall. And it's very consistent with a lot of these skeletons that were dug up out of the giants' graves in Brittany, the south of Britain, or where we still have a lot of giants' graves, and also in South America, and also here in America as well, in Appalachia. So it's very consistent, this height. And that's why the Sumerians used to describe these people as human-like, but not quite human.
People or spirits? I mean, this is energy, I guess, right? That's coming from...
Right now, they're living in another level of reality. They're no longer in physical form.
Right.
But in order to present themselves in a way that doesn't make us run for the hills, because I'm sure they, in their world, they obviously take on a different life form, which we have no reference for. So it would make us very scared to see something like that, even though there's nothing to be scared about. They present themselves in a way that it's very much physical, but they are now in physical form. They stopped coming because they said we just got tired of being crucified because, we just looked different. We had red hair, we had light skin, we had green eyes, sometimes we had blonde hair, which sounds very much like the foundation of the Nordic people. And the Scandinavian people.
Stop being crucified. You mean by Homo sapiens?
Exactly.
Okay.
I think they were having a good joke. Basically, they got tired of being killed, murdered, hit upon with rocks. The Peruvians used to do this when Viracocha was there. Viracocha and his 7 shining ones. They call them the Wapanti down there. They were building the terraces. They were building the megalithic structures. They're telling the Peruvians after the Great Flood about how to get yourself back on your feet again. But there was also a group of people that looked at these very tall people with unusual skulls, and they said, I don't know about that. And they start throwing rocks at them, and they eventually said, we're done. We're out of here.
Do you think these could be Denisovans? Do you think that...
That is a good question, actually, Matt. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. And so the color, was it like a white? Was it a gray? Was it darker? What was the color of the what you saw, the beings that you saw?
What they were wearing?
No, I'm assuming they weren't wearing clothes. If it was it like a light that came out? Was it an energy that came out, or was it a physical?
Oh,
being?
It was very much physical.
Very physical.
In fact, it's a place between dreaming and the physical world. It's hard to describe until you've experienced it, because the way I'm seeing it, it's very real. But yet there's a certain translucence about it. But yet they're not ghosts; they're actually physical. It's a bit like sitting in this room and listening to someone playing Guns N' Roses next door, and you can hear the echo. So it's real, but you're getting a portion of that image in this room as well, in terms of a sonic image. It's very much like that. So they don't really have a physical aspect, and yet they do, which I know sounds paradoxical, but it's the best way I can describe it. Because I've experienced them before in my earlier work with crop circle research, and I didn't make the connection until this happened to me in Egypt when I was back in England 4 years before that, looking at the origin of crop circles and trying to find out how the hell do these things come together. Because I had all the science all worked out. I had all the experiences. I had all the group research. And none of the researchers were talking to each other, which is really sad. And I was able to sort of glue all these things together, but I was still missing some pieces of information. And I went into a crop circle one night, about 11:30 at night. And again, a great experience. Again, I'm not looking for the experience. I'm not looking to make myself look important by having a connection with aliens or whatever you want to call it. I just want to go and say, look, what is this all about? What's going on here? What am I missing here? Because I have to tell the story to the public, and it needs to be really convincing. And next thing I know, I heard some what sound like footsteps behind me, and I'm lying flat on the ground in the middle.
The crop circle. Let's get to the crop circle in a minute though, because I want to back up and just fully understand what we're talking about here within the pyramid. So, yeah, I can understand you're talking about life coming out of the walls of the pyramid,
Yeah.
and that you mentioned that it was potentially within the crystalline structure of the rock. And so I can imagine a light-based being, I can imagine electromagnetic, kind of electromagnetism
Yeah.
or something. I can imagine maybe something
Vibration.
vibrational, but not physical. I don't understand. I don't understand how it could be a physical coming from the rocks, I guess. So,
Yeah, I don't get it either.
Yeah.
But for me, it wasn't a vision. It was actually very real. That's what I'm trying to point out is that there's a line between non-physical and physical that we're missing. That's the bit I'm talking about. It's really hard to explain unless you've actually experienced this with your own eyes. It's very uncanny. Yeah.
and you think that these are the beings that are responsible for for constructing the megaliths all over the world. Were they in this form, do you think, when they were, talking about Cusco and the Sacred Valley and constructing the walls and the structures down there? Do you think that they were in this physical, non-physical form, or do you think that they were in the form of giants back in ancient times when some of these South American structures were being built?
Yeah. No, they were very much physical. And this is coming from the people who were there to witness the event. I spent about 8 years researching and actually speaking to some of the oldest people on Earth, and like the Aymara in South America. Only 8,000 of them left, and luckily my official guide in Bolivia happens to be Aymara, and he has a beard, which men don't grow in South America. And that was my first question, was, you have a beard, Edgar? And says, yes. We once intermarried with the gods, with Viracocha, when we were living in an island in the middle of the Pacific called Lapuquije. And it sank. Some people call it Mu'ul, some people call it Lemuria. But we came here and we intermarried because there were not many gods that survived either. And but that doesn't mean that the gods were mysterious light beings. A god was anyone, like you and I, who understands the laws of nature. So if you want to understand how water works, for example, you become the god of water. So they were very much insistent that the gods were physical, real people. And yes, and you could hit them and they would hurt. And they could bleed as well as you and I. But they were just different to us. And that's where it came back to that phrase that the Sumerians picked up on, which was human-like, but not quite human. And again, it was always a very light skin compared to indigenous people. And I've heard this in the Pacific, for the Maori cultures. And they said, yep, we used to call them the Urukeu, the red-haired people. And they had red hair and green eyes, and they still do today when they intermarried Maori people. And I've watched them coming to my lectures in New Zealand, and I know who they are because they'll be red-haired Maori and blonde Maori. And I said to them, as a joke, and I don't think it's because you intermarried with Nordic people. I said, no, this goes back a long, long time when we intermarried with the survivors of the gods who married the survivors, humans, after the end of the Ice Age. And that goes back 12,000 years. And they're very proud of this story. So they're very much adamant that these people were once physical people who form part of an already it was a culture that was already in its decline, in its last stages of decline. They've already done it all and been there and got the T-shirt. They've been around for maybe hundreds of thousands of years. We don't know at this point. But by their leaving, it allows the hunter-gatherers then to start their slow, gradual rise to where we are today.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, there's all these accounts of red-haired giants all over the world in South America, from Spanish chroniclers, in North America with Native Americans at Lovelock Cave. Is that Love?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Egypt as well.
Egypt as well,
And
for
not
sure.
a product of the soil, because sometimes if you bury people in a certain type of acidic soil, your hair will turn red. You have to discount that immediately once you start looking at sand or the way that the soil is structured in the Andes, which is completely different. You can't get that kind of chemical reaction. So, and also the fact of the skulls, which are much more, they have a 25% greater cranial capacity than ordinary human skulls. So, when you go into Cusco and you look at the long heads, as I call them, and you can tell they're two different types. One are definitely children that were bound by their mothers when they're infants, with the bandages. And you know who they are because they look like cone heads. They look terrible. It looks like a bad Saturday Night Live sketch. And it was all to do with trying to raise their children up to the level of the gods to give them a certain status in life. Because these are just, ordinary people. And they said, well, if we bind the heads of the babies, they will look like the gods, so maybe our children will achieve a certain status in life. That was the whole point behind it. But then you have the beautiful elongated skulls. There's a natural look about it, which looks unusual, but it looks right. That's the real people. So they had that going for them as well. And again, always the description of the skin being much lighter than your average hunter-gatherer.
I apologize for taking you off track a little bit earlier to kind of go back.
Well,
and
we've been doing a lot of that.
Well, yeah. Hopefully, we can keep it kind of linear. But you were about to go to your experience with crop circles and maybe get into that topic a little bit. What got you into crop circles?
I knew exactly what I was looking at when I was ironing a shirt, a guy ironing a shirt in Chicago, where I lived. I just moved to America, and I was just watching the news, and the sound was turned off. Funny enough, I worked in media for a long time, but I haven't watched I don't watch television. It's one of those strange things, but I had a television on, the sound was turned off, and there was some program about the news, and there was a combine harvester going through a field in England. And there was this incredible symbol. And I remember remarking to my wife at the time, and I said, I know exactly what that is. And she says, what is it? I said, I can't explain it, but I know exactly what it is. I've seen this before. And it's like something just clicked. And I could actually, and looking back on it now, I can actually look at my career going downhill at that moment. And it was a successful career. I mean, I was making a lot of money, being very miserable, selling refrigerators and other things to people. Someone's got to do it. But my passion was always in the mysteries of life, the ancient civilization. I just didn't know how to make a living out of it. But little did I know that little image on the screen got me to go back to England for 4 weeks on vacation, which you don't do in America, which gets me fired automatically, and that's cool. And so I spent my time researching and asking questions, and the more questions I asked, the more questions came up. And then I got involved with the research and became part of the research community. And one thing led to the other, and before I knew it, I had so much information that I was being egged on by my friends. You need to write a book about this because you come up with something that no one else has. You've actually got to the core of what the phenomenon is about, what's behind it, and how it all clicks together. Because that's what I used to do for a living. I used to take marketing briefs with lots of information. I had to condense that into a billboard that sells you a particular message. I have to do exactly the same thing with this. I just never made the connection between the two. And grudgingly, I actually sat down one day and in my attic and started to write down my notes. And then chapter 3 came out, chapter 8 came out, chapter 1 came out. And within a week, I've got half a book written. As a writer, that doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen that way. It still took a couple of years to do all the science and back it up with hard science, which I did. But one of the things that I was missing was There are things here which don't connect. There's the electromagnetic spectrum, which is being manipulated by real crop circles, changes in the soil, chemical structure, imprinting of the water on the groundwater as well. All of that was being proved. There's also an anti-gravitational quality to the plants as well. And you can tell by the way the roots were pointing in the wrong direction. Now, that doesn't happen in agriculture. It doesn't happen in real life. So someone is manipulating the laws of nature. Someone's trying to be a god, in other words. And so I just went out one day in the middle of a field at 11 o'clock at night, and I said, perhaps if I lie down in one, in perfect silence, and just meditate on the situation, because by then the groups of people who were very connected with the core of the phenomenon were actually communicating with the core of beings that were behind it. And we were able to predict where they're going to appear and what they're going to look like. Of course, they never gave us the exact location and the exact timing because they didn't want to give away how the whole thing's put together. It was a bit of a game, but it was a friendly game. But anyway, there was a communication.
How were you communicating with them?
It was basically subconscious. We'd be able to guess using intuition. I know where the next one's going to be, and I think it's going to be on Friday. Well, it'd actually be on Thursday, and you'd be one field over. You're getting really, really close. And when you consider you're dealing with Great Britain, which is a pretty big island, and a lot of fields, that's pretty good. And I was playing this game with people across the Atlantic as well. I'd ask physicists, psychics, mathematicians, writers for their opinion. When's the next one going to be? Where's it going to be? What's it going to look like? And all of us were getting it pretty much close, within one or two fields, within 48 hours of the actual event. So we knew that there was a communication going on. Not only could we predict it, but we're also being fed information. Like you get this sudden idea of, oh, perhaps I should be looking into the gravitational pull on the way that roots the gravity affects roots in plants. Now, where the hell did I come up with that? I'm not a physicist. I'm not an agriculturalist. I had to go and look in a paper in Russia in 1953 that talks about the effect of anti-gravity on plants. So this is what I was saying. Someone was putting ideas into our head, and the only way that we could figure out where this was coming from, someone is feeding us the information, and it has to be the people who are behind the making of the crop circle.
But was it fed during live meditation, or was it fed just?
You could be
randomly?
having a pint at a pub, and perhaps I should be saying that because that affects the whole process. But no, you'd be having a pint at a pub, looking at some cows, and you go, well, that's interesting. Let me get my notebook out. Now, why would that be? And then I get an email from someone I never heard of saying you should look at this paper from 1953 about anti-gravity and blah, 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 blah. And I thought, well, thank you. That's exactly what I was about to do. How did you know? And the email bounces back. There's no such address. There was all of these weird things going all around us. So we knew there was something behind the scenes that was working on us and through us. And the only way we could figure this out is whoever's behind this is able to communicate subconsciously. And I've heard that in the UFO community, that there's always this non-verbal communication between people who have, is it close encounters of the third kind? Yes. When there's that communication, but somehow they're able to communicate in the language of where you come from. Not a perfect syntax, by the way. If you get perfect syntax, that's coming from your own head, because people outside this planet don't have perfect syntax in English. It's close, but not close enough. But they do communicate in a very subconscious way. And I've heard this again and again and again. So that's how we began to make that sort of connection. So back to the field.
Yeah. And are these the same people? Are these the 8.5 foot tall people that are connecting with you?
I didn't know this at the time, but yes, they are. Okay. Because when I heard the footsteps coming up behind me, I thought, God, I forgot to ask the farmer for permission to be here, but I'm not really damaging anything. I'll come up with an explanation. And then the footsteps stopped. This enormous bright light suddenly appears above me, and I said, well, I don't really do abductions. I got work to do. I don't need to be abducted. And the light went off, and someone hit me on the back of the shoulder, a bit like Mr. Spock doing the pressure thing. And suddenly I felt all my trepidation just vanish. I went, oh, I feel pretty good now. And I started watching my hand floating around me. And I still remember this. This was back in 1996, 97. And I was saying, wow, that's interesting. My arms are floating. Oh, both my arms are floating. And suddenly I can't feel the ground beneath me. I'm literally floating above the crop circle. And that's when you're now on another level of reality. And remember, I'm not imagining this, I'm physically experiencing this whole thing. And I remember seeing 3 people on either side dressed exactly the same way that I found in the Great Pyramid 5 years later, with 2 more at the front, and they were making these gestures with their hands like Balinese dancers. And I was lying there, standing there. In the 4th dimension, you don't know if you're standing or lying down. And I remember going, okay, yeah, okay, I totally understand, yeah. There was a sort of communication that was going on that was almost geometric. And next thing I know, I heard this click next to me, and I've taken a boombox. If you're under 30 years of age, you'd have to go and Google boombox and cassette tape. 45 minutes of the tape had elapsed. I just took a little quiet music to take with me in the field. And I heard the click, and I hit the ground with such a thud that I still had a bump on the back of my head 2 days later. And I thought, well, that was weird. And I drove back to my bed and breakfast. I got out of my bed, went and had breakfast next day. And I had another friend who's an incredibly gifted psychic as well. And she says to me, how did the evening go? And I said, I don't know if I can explain this. She goes, well, just have a cup of coffee. You never make sense before coffee anyway. So I sat down there with my coffee. I'm Mediterranean, so I've got to have my thick coffee before the machinery gets going. And then she starts channeling about what happened to me the night before. And she exactly, just like in Egypt 5 years later, she describes exactly the entire process. So I realized I hadn't made this up. And I hadn't been going there to make something up or expecting anything. So how could I make this stuff up? So that validated it for me. And it was then that I started connecting the dots that were missing between anti-gravity, electromagnetism, the disruption of the soil, and the encoding of the water in one lovely theory, which today, 30-odd years later, still holds its course. It hasn't been challenged. So, in fact, I just reprinted a book about 2 years ago because it was like swapping hands at $500 a copy on eBay. So I figured I better reprint it and sell it back at $20, which is much more reasonable. So that's how I ended up doing all of this, because I realized that these people, and I call them people because for me they're very real. They're like an extended family to me. They have been guiding my work. I just wasn't aware that's where my path was going. So for me, it means that it's self-validating because I'm not making this up. I literally don't know where I go with my work. Even today, right now, with the 8.1 books and 15 documentaries, I still don't know what the next project is because I have to go where my passion is and where I feel something is worth talking about and merits talking about, and it's of benefit to the society as a whole.
Let's get into your whole theory in just a minute, but these people, we call them people, but are they? Is this an extraterrestrial race of people, or is this what are these people?
They wouldn't address themselves as extraterrestrial. They would address themselves as being just on another level of reality. And they did make a point years later that there's no point figuring out where we are in the universe. You humans, and I quote, do not have the numerical values in which you can express where we are on our level of reality. Just accept that we're in the room next door. They have a good sense of humor about this. We're in the room next door, so don't worry about numbers. It's not, whether it's 5th dimension, 400th dimension, it doesn't matter. We're in a different radio station along the dial, but you know what? We're sharing the same dial. That's the important thing. And we've been coming in your Earth history, and I'm quoting directly now from memory. We've been appearing in your human history throughout the last 12,000 years in human form. And then we stopped coming before we decided that, getting pelted by rocks doesn't really help. It actually hurts. Just because we're different and we're supposed to be more advanced doesn't mean we also don't bleed. We do. So now we suggest things to humans through crop circles, through ideas that we feed to scientists once in a while, and they think, that's a great idea. I think I'll go and develop a hydrogen-powered car engine. And they think it comes from their imagination. Actually, it's the universe, or what you call guardian angels in religious iconography. They're feeding us little bits of information at a time because they realize, as human beings, we'd like to trip ourselves over once in a while. We're going in the right direction, and suddenly we decide to basically take out the pitchforks and the torches, and we fight each other, and we go back to where we were 100 years ago. It's happening right now, politically around the world. So whenever they see and they hear humanity asking for help through prayer, because your prayer sends out a packet of information through time and space. So if you sit here in this room and you think, you know what, I really would like some assistance with this particular thing, or I'd like to help humanity move in a certain direction which benefits everybody, and you send that thought out, and somewhere in the universe, another thought comes the other way, and it hits certain people at certain times, and they become the leaders or thinkers or philosophers or even mathematicians, architects that we renowned throughout history. They suddenly get inspired to do something which really moves the chains of human evolution forward by hundreds of years in the blink of an eye. Nikola Tesla is one person I can point to. Where did he come from? Where did his ideas come from? They're so ahead of the thing. And that's where I think they fit in. They no longer appear in human form, but they still assist. They still suggest, and then they get out of the way. If you're a Star Trek fan tuning in, you'll understand what I'm saying. It's called a prime directive. And Gene Roddenberry, like myself, he also attended certain seances with a... what's her name? Phyllis Schlemmer, a famous American medium, another trance medium. And if you look at the transcripts of a book called The Only Planet of Choice, he's one of the people asking her the questions. He's got an assumed name. He's got a pseudonym, of course. But if you look at the second generation of Star Trek series, look at the actual dialogue that's going on and the message that's being conveyed in the episodes, and they talk about the prime directive, the law of non-intervention, the first rule of the universe, which is you can't intervene in the development of another species unless they've asked for help. And then you do it quietly and very subtly, and then you get the hell out of there. Let the species be given the information. Let them do whatever they do best, which is either work with it or argue about it. And that's what we do very well, of course. And the crop circles fit in that dimension very clearly. You either love what crop circles are all about, or you hate this stuff. You think it's all made by a bunch of guys with a piece of rope and some planks. And yes, today that's how they're made, because the real phenomenon really doesn't exist anymore. It kind of stopped around 2003. Sorry to bring you the bad news, but it's still there. But from that, we've extracted mathematical theorems, the first time in 2,500 years. We've had anti-gravitational technology, which has now been built in England, in Oklahoma, of all places, and in Australia. And I can't tell you any more, because of course I have to kill you, and this is the actual predicament, is that they have this, they developed the image that I put on the cover of my book, and I put that image on the cover for a certain reason, because I knew what it did. I just couldn't tell you what it was, because I knew that someone in the science community would be inspired by that image, and they would build that as an actual model. And they said, when they contacted us, it defies gravity. It's just that we can't bring this out right now because the political environment is such that it will go nowhere. We have to bide your time and wait for the right moment to bring this out. And sometimes it'll come out in increments, but that's how important this information is. So it goes back to what I was saying about these beings drip-feeding bits of information that would help us move along. And in this case, is to wean us out of fossil fuels. I mean, anti-gravity is a wonderful thing. We're almost there with maglev. I mean, in Japan, where they have the trains that they travel at, what, 500 miles per hour or something ridiculous like that. I mean, it's an incredible feat of engineering, but you know what? It's quiet, efficient, and it doesn't pollute anything. So this is why I believe that these people are very much concerned with our development, and they are. They are very much concerned in the way that we're creating the decisions that we are right now, because everything that we do right now will have an effect through time and space. There are other species out there, millions of species out there, that are saying, well, whatever happens on Earth and whatever direction that they take will also affect the decisions that we make, because we're all connected at some level. Whether it's invisibly or tangibly, that doesn't matter. We are all connected. And whatever we decide to do will have repercussions through time and space. So they're concerned about our behavior, let's say, but they can't directly intervene. They can only suggest and then let us get on with the process.
Yeah, a lot of different directions, a lot different directions we could go now, but why don't we kind of...
I told you.
Yeah. Why don't we kind of think about, finish up on crop circles then maybe, and tell me, like, what else is crazy cool about crop circles, I guess, first, but then why were they creating crop circles in the first place? What was it to pass and share information, and why did it stop in 2003, and how were they creating crop circles?
It was to do, again, with a cry of help from humanity, a kind of a global cry for help, which went back before the Second World War. People who were working with philosophy groups and spiritual groups, they could see the projection of where fascism was going around the world, and also the authoritarian movements towards a global conflict 5 years before it really got out of control. And they sent out a cry for help, like, we need some help here. Whoever you are out there, if there's someone out there, we need some help. And eventually, it took about 40 years, although crop circles are really, they're not a modern phenomenon. They have been happening through history. I mean, there's reports from the 1700s of farmers finding exactly the same things. Even in South Africa, they talk about them being the circles of the gods, and they show them great respect. And it's all about a communication between the tribe and the gods.
So do you think that they've really stopped, or do you think that we're kind of in an
we knew that they were going to stop because
period?
they said it's a communication, and every conversation has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And they said, well, we're giving you the information. Someone's going to be used to publish this information. I didn't realize they're going to talk. They're addressing me in the room. I thought, oh, great, someone's going to write the information. They're going to publish it. Fantastic. Oh, you don't mean me, do you? That was a bit of a surprise. And other people as well have done it as well. No, the point was that they're going to feed us information, we'd think about it, and then we implement it or not. It's a free will planet that we live on. And after that, they said we're just going to tweak things here and there. The real ones would be moving more towards America. And they were. They began to appear around Serpent Mound in Ohio. They began to appear in Saskatchewan and Alberta, and the farmers there had the best stories with their interactions with balls of light and beams coming down and making these things in less than 15 seconds. And the whole thing was about a piece of communication. So we knew that by 2003, the communication was done, information was published, and then it would just peter out bit by bit. And the reasons were manifold. One is because they were trying to feed information into the Earth's energy grid. So like you and me, the Earth also has arteries and veins, which allows the energy to move through the body of the Earth. They're called telluric currents. Some people call them ley lines. Not the same thing. So these telluric currents that move through the Earth and along the Earth, they are made of electromagnetic frequency. And you can imprint them with information. The Aboriginal people of Australia know them as the Jalkiri. And they'll be walking across the desert, and they can hear the Jalkiri and the information imprinted on the Jalkiri. They'll turn right, and they'll walk for 60 miles through the desert, and they'll get to the next sacred space. So you can imprint information. Now, the thing is, the biggest concentrations of crop circles appeared in southern Britain and also in the Canadian prairie, the two deepest aquifers on the planet. Now, if you follow the concept of homeopathy, which has been proved at least 5 times in scientific terms, no matter what the detractors are trying to tell you, you'll know that when you imprint information electromagnetically into water and you dilute that water, the stronger the original message. So that was an incredible achievement, to be able to imprint this information into the two deepest chalk aquifers, and in case of the prairie, the limestone aquifer, and allow that information to be coded into the water. And of course, it's draining through the rivers and the oceans around the world. So we're all drinking crop circle energy, for that matter. Whether you work or act on it or not, that's up to you as an individual. So it's not about an imposition of a will. It's about a suggestion. So you either accept that and you work with it, or you reject it. That's why in crop circle research, there's a very black and white mentality. It's a bit like politics, far right, far left, and there's nothing in the middle. You either love it or hate it. So that was one thing. The second thing that they said they were doing was to buy humanity enough time to understand they're in the middle of massive changes, and you have got to prepare for the changes that are coming. People will die and people will live. It's been happening for thousands of years. There's nothing new about that. We're just buying you time to get your act together. So some of the crop circles are not meant for humans. They're put at specific junctions of the telluric currents that go into the Earth's memory system, like a computer hard drive, and it tells the hard drive, don't activate that app just yet. Activate it 10 years from now. Let the humans figure out they're in the middle of massive climate change, and God knows what other things there are out there, so they can prepare and they can ride the upcoming changes stoically, elegantly, and hopefully most of them will survive as well, because that's the point. You don't want anybody to suffer as a result of all of this. And the third point was to introduce ideas, new ideas into the grid, into the planetary grid, that would influence people who are open to suggestibility, that there's new ways of doing things that we haven't tried before, like the whole anti-gravity thing that I just spoke about, new mathematical equations that they've introduced into the system. All of these things are now coming into play. They also talked about healing modalities. There's a system that exists on my website, which I've never, ever advertised in my life, where we were collecting information from people who walk into crop circles as skeptics, and they don't believe in this stuff, and yet they're healed of something that they've been suffering for 10 years. And they can't explain how walking through a wheat field into an area full of trampled crop can completely cure them of the affliction that they've had. And we began to collect these by the hundred. This doesn't happen to people who don't believe in something. It happens to people who believe in something. So you think, something's going on here. So 5 years later, 8 years later, we began to collect more science behind what was happening in the water and the plants and how it relates to the human body, and realized there is a coding taking place only inside the crop circles, and it's transferring to people. So I developed that into a system of cards that resembles the cards used in resonance therapy throughout the world. And some of the stuff that I hear coming back from people that have used this system to heal themselves is out of this world. And again, nothing is suggested. I've never advertised it, and it's still going strong to this very day. So all of these things that the circle makers, as I call them, said were going to happen and that they had planned to do have come to be true. And this would be 20 years later after the original crop circle appeared.
Fascinating. So what about the anti-gravity thing? What else is there on that story? You mentioned Oklahoma and Australia.
I can't tell you.
We already did.
Not because I'm just suggesting something. Not because I don't know, and not because I'm being coy. It's just because I'm protecting the people who have done it, and they've asked me not to say any more. And they said, all you can do is say, yes, we've built the diagram or the crop circle image that you have in the cover of your book, which is very cunning of me. And we can tell you, as a 3D model, once you give it an electrical impulse, it starts going off the floor like anti-gravity. But we can't tell you where we live, who we are. We'll be in touch with you at the right moment because we don't want to die. I mean, look at the guy that designed the water-powered car, the hydrogen-powered car in Seattle back in the 90s, I think it was. He gets run over by his own vehicle twice. Isn't that interesting? So, yeah, you've got to be very careful in this kind of world because you're talking about free technology that anyone can use. So I respect that. I'm just waiting for the emails to come back and let them tell their story in their own way.
Why do you trust these people so much that they're telling the truth?
Because we were told the same thing by the circle makers. That design actually has something to do with anti-gravity, and I'm not supposed to write about it. I can suggest something in the way I've written about that particular design, and I do go into great length about the design, about the mathematics, about the subtleties, the strategic angle that's in there, which NASA picked up on, by the way, and this I can talk about. There was a gentleman from NASA that picked me up for a conference. And he says, well, we really enjoy reading your book. I said, well, thank you very much. It's an old book. We specifically like the exotic angles that you published in there. And I said, yeah, I don't know much about them. I was just, putting down the angles that we're finding in the fields and measuring them, connecting that with the information we're getting through this channel and recognizing that there's something very important about this and the importance of measuring things properly. These things aren't errors. They're very, very specific. And they said, and the guy says, well, there's one of them which is very important to us, and we've been playing around with that, and we can tell you it does some unusual things with gravity. And I said, bingo. And I said, and did I ever write about that? No, but you hinted at something like that, and we followed the hint. And I said, that's exactly what I was told to do in the channeling. Hint and let someone else pick up the story, because then you're only putting the suggestion out there, and someone else then takes it to the next level. And that's why I believe these people, because we knew that it was already part of the information that we were given from this source that then starts playing itself out in real life without any of us mentioning the end result.
Okay, and you think that the UAP phenomenon that we're seeing is, for the most part, then a product of this technology?
Now, that I can't say for sure. I'm not 100% into the UFO research department, that you got to ask someone else that's involved in that particular area. My work's on the periphery of UFO research, because that's a whole different discipline, and you really got to know what you're talking about in that particular line of work. I just rub shoulders with it once in a while, but I would not be surprised if it was. I'm trying to remember some of the early researchers into UFOs. There was a guy who, I'm going to kick myself for not remembering his name, Marcel Vogel. He was working with crystalline structure and about the way you can shape crystals and move the angles and achieve all kinds of interesting effects with it, especially when you add vibration into it. So if I remember correctly, he also brought up the possibility that when you start moving angles in terms of the crystalline structure of objects, you also start altering their relationship to gravity. But that was back in the 50s. That was even before the time I was born. So that's where I would go with that. But I would not be surprised seeing what they do. And in fact, you just reminded me of a great story. And I think I can talk about this. It's very funny and very famous. We're in the middle of England. It's about 1996. And we're on the side of a hill called Golden Ball Hill. Actually, no, we're next to Golden Ball Hill. And it's called Golden Ball Hill because all the farmers keep seeing balls of light flying into it and coming back out of it. And they just look at these things going, whatever. I mean, they've seen them so many times. It's like, yep, we call it fairies, will-o'-the-wisp, whatever, aliens. They're totally blasé about the whole thing. And it was a beautiful day, and we're sitting about 400 feet up on the hill next to Golden Ball Hill on a slope. I'm filming a few things, beautiful landscape. And there's a beautiful crop circle in front of us, a real one in front of us. And I get this sort of voice in my head that says, you really want to pick up the camera and start filming? I went, what? I turned to the guy next to me and said, did you just say that? I said what? Pick up my camera and start filming? No, I didn't say anything. Oh, I just heard. And then he says, no, I just heard that in my head as well. I said, wait a minute. Is there a radio behind us? Who's feeding us into our heads? So I picked up the camera and started filming, and they're not balls of light during the daytime. They're like silver spheres. They're about, 5, 6 feet wide, silver-colored. But in the evening, when the sun goes down, they take on this incredible luminous quality. It's iridescent quality, usually with a little halo around it of complementary color. And this ball of light suddenly stops in front of me and in the most wonderful English says, hi, how's the filming going? And I said, it's going fine, thanks. Hi, how are you? I said, and the guy next to me saying, I heard exactly the same thing. I said, wow, so it is telepathic. Okay. So, what brings you here? You're up to no good and mischief, aren't you? He said, yeah, watch this. I said, watch what? I suddenly turned my camera that way, and there's a black military helicopter approaching from the other side. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I didn't even know that black military helicopters exist up until that point. But there it is, a black military helicopter from the local base about 15 miles away from where my house was. And it's bristling with equipment. There's people inside, and they stop just short of the orb. And they start filming, and suddenly the ball wobbles, and she goes, watch this. And I went, what are you doing? And it disappears, and it reappears behind the helicopter. And there's pandemonium inside the helicopter, and we're waving our arms over. Behind you, it's behind you. So two guys on the side of a hill telling the British military where to look. Behind you. And he goes, okay. And they turn the helicopter around, and more cameras, more filming equipment. And then it kind of wobbles again, and it goes underneath the helicopter. And then it's complete pandemonium. We're going, underneath you, what? Below you, what? Oh, never mind. And I'm looking at this orb, and I'm going, you're having fun, aren't you? I said, yeah. And he goes, well, that was fun. Well, I'll see you around, and bye. I said, and we went, bye. And then it just wobbled, and it went, boom. And the guy says to me, did you catch that? I said, I did not catch that at all. What the hell was that? That must be like triple the speed of light. And the helicopter just put its nose down, and it sulked all the way back to the airbase. And I thought, I've got a bad feeling about this. I know who lives in that house down there. I hope I'm not implicating him.
Why do I think that you don't have the footage of this? Do you have the footage of this?
Eventually, I did. This is the second part of the story.
Why do I think you don't have it now?
You're psychic. I said, I know who lives in that house. He is a sound designer for the BBC, and a friend of mine. So we took a drive down there, knocked on the door, said, Graham, not his real name, Graham, don't say a word, put this in the machine, make a copy right now, and put the kettle on. Don't ask questions. Shut the door. And we're watching it on the screen, the whole thing's right there. 5 minutes later, knock on the door, very gentle knock, open the door. Two of Her Majesty's constabulary, looking very posh. Good afternoon, gentlemen. They're very polite in Britain, the police. Good afternoon, gentlemen. We are not having this discussion. We are not here. We'd like the tape of the incident that you didn't film that didn't happen. And they said, how the hell did you find... We're not here. And there's a big smile on his face. We're not here. We're not having this conversation. Nothing happened. And you did not make a copy of the tape. Said, officer, we haven't even the kettle's not boiled yet. Come in for a cup of tea. We're not here. We're not having this conversation. And I said, okay, well, here's the tape. No problem. Are you going to be by any chance over at the Seven Bells in Bottlesford later on? What, the pub? I said, yeah. We'll be there later in plain clothes. Then we can talk. That's how the British military and the police work in Britain. It's all very, very down to earth. No sense of, guns in your face, that kind of thing. I never felt threatened for 1 minute. And then at the pub, they spilt the beans. Like, what the hell's going on? We see these things all the time. But now, as normal citizens without a badge on, we can talk about these things. What is going on? I said, well, we do crop circle research. Do you want us to tell you what we know? You tell us what you know, and we won't use your real names, and somehow we'll get to the source of all of this. But we can tell you that whatever that thing is, those balls of light are, they're conscious, they communicate telepathically, they don't mean us any harm, and they are somehow involved in the crop circle making process. We just don't know. And that's when the police opened up with their stories of what they've seen, and they said, we can't talk about it because we have to, there's confined to the Official Secrets Act, and I get that, and I respect that. But they're ever so nice in terms of people. But the video eventually ends up in it was given to, I think it was called Crop Circle Communique, is where it ended up. I can't remember. My amnesia avenue is kicking in from a long time ago. It made the video. You'll have Google video cassette. And it eventually made the rounds throughout the sort of, Amazons of this world. So it does exist. The video actually does exist.
So Ryan can find it. Ryan can find it, and we can
He
show
could probably
it
find
for
it,
this
yeah.
episode. So the video of this craft that's disappearing and reappearing in front of a helicopter, behind a helicopter, under a helicopter, this exists, and we can watch this?
There's a witness behind it, and there's the third witness that actually made a copy of the tape.
So yes.
So yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
But it was the funniest thing. It's like, I'm thinking back on it.
How did it go? How did it get out of the hands of British intelligence and back out into the public?
Because I made a copy of it.
Oh, the copy.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a terrible liar.
Yeah. Okay. And the quality of it?
Oh, the quality. It's as you'd expect from. But that's not it. That's another incident.
I've seen this one.
Yeah.
I think Nick Pope said this one was a hoax, but I don't know.
Actually, that looks like my video. How did that get into Nick Pope's hands? That's pretty funny. Yeah, there's one of those little orbs going into the actual crop. Yeah, I've seen that one. I've got an identical copy to that. Basically, it's a good old-fashioned, what we used to call it, a video cam.
Yeah.
There's very little thin cassettes they used to put in little Sony camcorders.
Right.
So the quality is even worse than that. But it's there. I just don't remember the name of the video that actually did make the rounds.
But this thing was right in front of you, and you were
It was
recording
about 400 yards because we're on the side of a hill. The crop circle's down here, and it's about 400 yards.
Oh, okay. So when you were saying that it was communicating with you telepathically, I had an image in my head that it was 5 feet in front of your face. But no, it was 400. It was 1,000 feet away from your face.
It's about 400 feet in front. Yeah, because the helicopter had to come there, and they can only come so close to the side of the hill.
Okay. So in terms of video evidence, would that be your best video evidence of that encounter with the helicopter?
One of them.
Yeah.
And I've also had, just like the video we just saw there, these little balls of light just flying over the crop circles, going down into them, coming back out. And that's pretty much the best evidence that we had. There's been one famous incident, which was the one where we saw a crop circle being made by a ball of light, which is a complete fabrication by a a digital facility in Bristol, England, and the police got involved, and there was an actual examination of that, and they found the whole thing to have been completely made in the studio.
Yeah, I remember that one. That was the one I was referring to earlier.
Yeah, no, that's completely fake. And in fact, I was going to be, they did it as an entrapment for me, which is kind of funny because I wasn't a high-level researcher at the time. I mean, I don't like being, I don't like the limelight. And no matter what anybody says and all the books and stuff that I've published, I really don't like the limelight. I like to keep a little under the radar. And it works fine for me. Some people like the limelight, great for them. And
yeah, you haven't done many podcasts. You did Next Level Soul, I guess, but I haven't seen you do too much.
oh, I've done hundreds. I never keep track of them.
Yeah. Smaller ones, though? Or?
No, there's been Art Bell, one of my first shows. I mean, he was huge back then. And one of the greatest interviews ever. I mean, it was 3 in the morning when I was living in England. He was in Nevada. And he was able to keep me awake for 3 hours because you're falling asleep and you got to keep your facts going and your methodology going, and he knew how to phrase a question to keep me on track for 3 hours. I remember that very well. No, I've done hundreds, thousands. I don't keep track of any of this stuff.
I guess I just meant big ones recently, but
the Next Level Soul, I think, is one of the big ones. Regina Meredith, of course, Gaia. I'm all over Gaia.
Cool.
But no, at the time, it was the fact that I was keeping my head down a little bit because I knew I was onto something that no one had figured out yet. And I kind of felt a little pressure from the outside. And but it didn't bother me. I knew someone's guiding me throughout all of this. I feel very protected in some ways. I'm not complacent about it either. And I felt that there's a guy that came up to me at the end of the crop circle season in 1996, I believe it was. And he said, where can I go and find the big one? I said, oh, well, the big one's already happened. He said, well, I think you've probably missed the season now, but you can probably go here, here, or here. I mean, there's a pretty good chance something might happen there. Okay, where can I find you? I said, well, you can leave a message for me at the pub. Okay. Anyway, next day, I get to the pub, and there's a group of people waiting for me. And I said, are you Freddy Silva? I said, I turned around, I said, well, do I owe you money? I said, yeah, why? Well, we caught something on film. I said, oh, how opportune. And they showed me this video of this crop circle, which I hadn't seen yet. I said, oh, we haven't seen this one yet. And these balls of light flying around it. Oh, look, balls of light flying over a crop circle. And I showed it to my accomplice, and I said, what do you think? Well, that's very interesting. That sounds like a lot of the eyewitnesses I've seen over the years. Wow, if this is true, then, wow, it validates the eyewitness accounts that we've had since 1870. And but let me just double check on this. This is an old friend of mine, Matt. It comes from my grandmother, and it was twitching, and I'm going, something smells here. I mean, the day before, someone was asking me where to go and film real crop circles. Next day, they've got a footage of something quite incredible. And I thought, it's too good to be true. So I called up Colin Andrews, who at the time was the acknowledged expert on the subject, and I said, listen, I've got something here you need to look at. If it's real, it's incredible, but be careful. And if it is real, why don't you announce it? Because it sounds more credible coming from you, because you have the publicity, you have the image. People don't know really who I am. It sounds better coming from you. So you're giving due course. Anyway, cut a long story short, it turns out that Colin didn't buy the hook. And so, of course, the people who made the video made themselves scarce for a week. Well, we didn't know at the time that they went back to the studio to redo the footage to make it look like the balls of light are making the crop circle. Because when he announced that to the press, I said, Colin, that's not what we saw originally. There was a crop circle fully formed, and I have a witness to prove this. And there are balls flying over it. The crop circle was already formed. It wasn't forming. And that's when the investigation took place. But incredibly, that's how a lot of the 80 eyewitnesses going back to 1870 have said that's how crop circles are made, usually by a beam of light, orbs flying around it, and the whole thing takes place in less than 15 seconds. And no matter how complicated. And we know this fact because when you look at some of the complex ways in which the patterns are weaved, the way that the central spiral takes on this the form of a golden ratio spiral, which is the spiral found in nature, no matter how complex and how big the pattern, the original plants eventually go all the way around and they intertwine with the plants at the beginning. So it means that it's taken the entire process less than 15 seconds for the plants to be dropped and get intertwined within each other. And they're not damaged at all. It's an incredible process. And I always felt when I came up upon a real one, I had to take my boots off and apologize for treading on this piece of art, because once you're in there, you damage the crop. And you can hear the air coming from under your feet, where the crop is actually 2 inches above the soil, and it's hovering like anti-gravity over the soil. It's quite beautiful. And I still feel regret having to walk in, but I said, I've got to take pictures, I've got to take measurements, I've got to take soil samples, I've got to take this, and tiptoe and do as least damage as possible. Great respect. It's a bit like walking on the Sistine Chapel ceiling, upside down, while experimenting with gravity.
Right.
Great days.
So your total theory then, so if you're tying together your total theory and you can explain that to us in a couple of minutes.
15 seconds or less.
Well, a couple minutes maybe.
It's a thought form. A thought is sent through time and space, which then coalesces as that thought form as an electromagnetic frequency or as a vibration. When it hits the atmosphere, it gets denser as compared to outer space. So we begin to see that as sound spectrum, as light and also as sound. And that's what the old witnesses have said. There's a beam of light and there's a high-pitched sound associated with this. And when that sound hits a physical object like wheat or barley, it expresses itself in this geometric shape called a cymatic pattern, which is part of the science of cymatics, when we put sound frequency and you aim sound at, say, powder or liquid mediums. And there's incredible work that's been done on this over the last 60 years that shows that when sound hits a physical form, it takes on these incredible geometric patterns. And I can actually find a library of Hans Jenny, who was one of the early pioneers of cymatics, where each one of his slides I can account for as a crop circle pattern, and that's where the penny drops. So thought form sent from this super consciousness that once had physical form, sent through time and space, hits the denser layers of the atmosphere to a point where we can see and hear it, and then hits the ground, and there's a shape that relates itself to the very frequency that created it in the first place. So now we've got the science to back it up as well. And then, of course, there's the plants where the roots are pointing in the wrong direction. The only way you can get plants to have the roots pointing 90 degrees to where they should be going, which is the center of gravity, that can only be explained by anti-gravity as well. So that was the theory in a nutshell, in a very small nutshell, because there's a whole chapter that goes into it.
So the roots within the roots of the actual
crop circle
crops that have been knocked down, those roots are now at 90 degrees as opposed to going down.
Going to the center of gravity.
And the rest of the roots that are undisturbed still have roots that are going straight down?
If you go outside the crop circle, just pick up the plants and they're pointing exactly where they should be.
Straight down.
Straight down.
Yeah, okay.
Incredible stuff.
And
no damage. I mean, if you leave them alone, the real crop circles will, within 15 days, come right back up again. A bit shorter because they have to go bend back along the plant's knuckles. So we'll call them nodes. Just like we have knuckles on our fingers, so the plant has this as well. It helps the plants right themselves back up to, in case there's high wind, for example. But they'll be a bit shorter because part of the plant has already been bent and steamed into place. There's a high element of heat that's been involved. 1,600 degrees Celsius in 1 nanosecond, which has boiled the water inside the plant, and it's made the plant supple like glass, and it rehardens in half a second. And you can tell this is also taking place because the exterior of the plant has also been superheated, and there's charring on the actual plant itself. But it's not enough to damage the plant. In fact, next year, and the farmers will tell you this, where the crop circle was, I've reseeded the field. The plants are now growing faster and taller than the plants around it. So you get the opposite crop circle. So that's quite an incredible observation by the farmers. And they know what's going on too. They'd rather not talk about it. But if you make friends with them, they'll say, yep, I saw this thing at 2 a.m. It always happens between 2 and 3 a.m, by the way. And there was steam coming out of it, like the whole crop of field had been sort of superheated in a fraction of a second. And you see the steam coming out. And farmers don't usually talk like that. They're pretty serious. But they did say we were kind of distressed by the fact that we've lost our livelihood. That's the first question on their mind. But then we realized if we leave it alone, the plants come back up and they're fine. We can harvest them. It's the people walking in there that cause the damage, and that's what annoys us more than anything else. So we understand that whatever's behind this, whether it's aliens, little green man, whatever it is, or geometrically gifted crows was the theory at one point. What can I say? So whatever it is, it's actually helping the plants because the next year's crop is actually doing much better. And the only time I've ever heard that research was in Central America with the people, the Maya, taking the seeds to the platforms of the pyramids, and the electrical current that rides up the pyramid imprints itself on the seeds, and they could get 5 crops out of 1 year of seeds. That's how the Maya civilization fed itself. And that only came up in the 90s because of a guy who was researching the same thing in crop circle studies as well. The late John Burke was his name.
Has there ever been any scientific studies done on the root system and how they're impacted of these real events?
Incredibly, no, which is a bit sad. The only science that was done on it was the imprinting of the water, which shows that there's an electromagnetic signature 136% above normal, imprinted in the water only inside the crop circle. They've done the experiments with the soil that shows a higher amount of ferrites in the soil. Again, you can't explain that under normal circumstances. The isotopes in the actual plants themselves, which shows that the actual stems of the plants have been altered in some unnatural way. You can actually see it under the microscope. They've been stretched and elongated to a point where it's not known in nature what can cause this, except for ultrasound or infrasound, both of which would be viable candidates, because ultrasound is what affects the actual shape to go down in terms of the actual signature of sound. But the infrasound works at the cellular level. It actually manipulates physical objects to do what they do, to the point where you can now use the same frequencies to heal bone structures in hospitals today. So if if you've done a fracture to your bone, you put a plaster cast, put a hole, put a sound device in there, and it heals much quicker than it would do under normal circumstances. So did that come from crop circle research? I don't know, but now we have sonic work being done on bone structure as a result of understanding infrasound and ultrasound.
And what is it about the process itself that makes the crops grow better the next season? And is that something that continues past that next year, or is that like a one and done thing?
It happens within a year and a half, and then the frequency is still there. It dissipates over 5 years. So you can still, if you're very sensitive, you can go into the middle of a field, and I've done this after I've developed my abilities over the course of the research, which again, we can all do this. It's just a matter of believing that you have this ability and then practicing it, like driving a car. You can go in the middle of a field and actually stake out pretty much the area where the original crop circle used to be and be pretty much 90% right on target. So
You can't do it today, though.
if the crop circle is more than 5 years old, no.
Right.
The energy just dissipates over time.
Which they all are, you said. Because
Which, the real stuff really stopped around 2003, with
Right.
the odd exception, maybe 1 or 2 real ones every year for about the next 5 years, and then poof, all man-made since then. But essentially, it's the infrasonic and ultrasonic frequencies that are responsible for all of this. They retain themselves in the actual element of the seed itself.
Crazy. So that's crop circles.
Yeah,
Basically,
and little
yeah.
did I know it had anything to do with temples, pyramids, and it turns out, actually it did. It's the same technology that was going into crop circles, was the same stuff that was behind Stonehenge, pyramids, Pumapunku, Sacsayhuaman, you name it. It's the same thing, except they were using very large rocks. So that was the second part of my career, going, where do I go from, a best-selling book? I mean, right out of the bat, a best-selling book, still is to this very day, and I'm very proud of it. My life was disappearing and collapsing while that book is being put together. Literally, I lost friends, marriage, house, cats. That was hard, getting rid of the cats, because I had to move back from America back to Britain, and they had to go through quarantine. I could not do that to my cats, so I had to leave them behind. Yeah, and I had a good life, but I gave it all up, and I'm falling apart, and the book is being put together, I get very emotional about it. It kept me alive, that book. I knew that it had to be written because there's something of huge benefit. And I was watching the benefit to people around me, that people would work on the information that we were publishing and watch their lives improving. And there was a spiritual component to it. And I'd watch people, and I'm not talking about religion here, I'm talking about spirituality, something very different. And I watched the world get better around me, and I realized there's something here that I'm doing, that I'm part of, that is making the world a better place to live. And I can't think of a better thing for having ruined my life, my former life, to get to this point, because I can die and say, I've moved things along 1%. You know, I've done the best I can. I've made good use of my life here. I've paid the price for it. But you know what? I wouldn't change it for anything else, because I see the benefit that it does. But little did I know that it would set the stage for them to understand how sacred space works and how all these sacred sites work as well. I never made that connection. But again, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a physicist. I have to learn everything from scratch, which gives me a bit of an advantage because I don't have a specific angle to preach. I'm going at it like, I guess, like an adolescent who's curious about something. And I say, well, how does that work? Oh, let me learn about physics. Oh, that's interesting. And you put one and one together and you start realizing there's a big story going on.
Love it. Love it. Good stuff. Well, let's take a quick break. Let's get a bite to eat and then come back and maybe...
Well, now we're talking.
Finish it up. Yeah, good. Good stuff, man. Yeah, excellent. We're back. And so probably a good segue from what we were just talking about into the next topic would be maybe describing how the crop circles and temples are related.
Yeah, you wouldn't think the two would be cohabiting the same public house, but they actually do.
Right.
That was a surprise and a revelation, except for the fact you're dealing with megaliths instead of flattened crop. The foundation of every temple on the face of the planet, even those in the desert, in Monument Valley of all places, you have to have water, the basic element, whether it's running water, underground water, fountains, anything, because water is the element that sustains all life. It's also a wonderful element for which to attract telluric current. And I remember a press release from NASA back in 2008, if amnesia lane is correct, where they say, when we're looking for telluric currents that flow along the face of the Earth, we first look for underground veins of water because the water will attract the telluric current. End of quote. Now, why NASA is looking for telluric currents, I don't know. But the thing is that every temple on the face of the Earth, without exception, even the simple standing stone, the menhir, they're always located at the intersection of these electromagnetic lines of force. So those are the two fundamental elements, and they happen to be the same fundamental elements of crop circles as well. You have the water element, and then you have the telluric currents where they cross. That's where you also get the genuine crop circles, not the man-made stuff. So after that, it's just a matter of going on to, instead of dealing with flattened crop, you have megaliths. Now, they didn't just pick any old rocks to create temples. And after about 10 years of observing this, and I've seen God knows how many thousands of these things around the world, I come to the realization that there's a reason why they drag these rocks from as much as 400 miles away when the rock over there was perfectly suitable. And you start asking questions. What's wrong with that rock and what's right with that rock over there? And it turns out there's a common element going on. They're very rich in quartz, and it's a specific type of quartz that was also used for very early radio receivers. So it has a high piezoelectric quality to it. Secondly, they're packed with iron, which means that also the stones attract lightning. So the last place you want to hide when there's a thunderstorm is inside a megalithic chamber. And I just came back from Portugal to demonstrate the point where a massive cork tree that was over 100 years old literally got taken out next to a big dolmen. The dolmen's okay, but the tree got the full hit of the lightning. And then it's also packed with magnetite, and that also helps to attract the magnetic current to the actual site. So in other words, you're dealing with these megaliths, which are packed with the exact right minerals, which allow it to store information, memory, and of course energy. And there was a famous, actually he wasn't even famous, and I wish he was, a guy called Pierre Méreau in France who wrote a little pamphlet. He was a skeptic, he was an electrical engineer, wrote a little pamphlet, it's about 56 pages long in French, about les pierres sont vivants, the stones are alive. And I've been telling people for years about that the sacred sites are not static. These things are living organisms. You can sense them. They breathe in and out. They go to sleep overnight, and they are awakened at dawn. And the energy is it's felt to a greater degree at dawn. And he said exactly the same thing. And what he did was he went around prodding the stones with electrical devices to show that, yes, the stones, depending on the shape, whether it's a menhir or a dolmen or a stone circle or a passage mound, that shape defines the way the direction is attracted to it, how it's stored, and how long it stays in the actual site. The general consensus that he came across was that every 78 minutes, the energy is stored up in the stone and it's released. So if you touch the stones at the wrong moment, at the wrong time, you get one hell of an electric shock. And there's no end of dowsers that have done this. They'll get curious, they'll getting a dowsing response, and they'll go, that's interesting. And they'll put their hand on it, they ground the energy, and they won't feel their forearm for 15 minutes. And I'm one of them. So it's a very weird experience. But then you're back to normal. And he also said that the energy field works like ripples around the actual stones themselves, as much as 36 feet away from the actual stone itself. So the stone literally has its own aura, its own spirit. It retains information. And it's going to be there forever. As long as people go to the sites, they honor the sites, they put their prayer and their wishes into the sites, which sends a kind of an electromagnetic packet of information into the quartz, and the quartz remembers. So let's say you're standing in front of a big stone, and then you'll say, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here to touch you and to be in your presence and to learn something. And the stone remembers that because that information is going into the quartz, and the quartz remembers it. Now, you do that thousands of times over the course of the year, multiply it by, 5,000, 6,000 years, you can go back and retain the information. Well, it's the same thing with crop circles as well. The energy field would still be in the field 5 years after the crop circle has been mowed down.
Is it the quartz, or is it electromagnetic energy within the quartz?
It's the electromagnetic energy within the quartz, and the quartz remembers and soaks it up like blotting paper. Yeah, so after that, you've got geometry, where the geometrical structure of the design of the temple will define the purpose for which it is built. In come the Russian scientists during the Iron Curtain, when they were saying, well, we don't have the money to build hospitals, but we hear through the woo-woo people that these buildings, because of their shape, they induce healing or alter states of consciousness or a kind of a spiritual connection with the other world. Let's find out if it's true. And these people were way ahead of the game. They really were. They wrote some of the best information. And they said, no, it's true. We decided to build rooms shaped like pentagrams in Bulgaria, because we've heard that the pentagram was always associated with healing. And even the Greek philosophers understood this. And they said, yes, it's true. You put people in a pentagonal-shaped room, rate of healing goes up dramatically. Same thing when you put blood inside a spherical shape. The blood coalesces much quicker. So there was a relationship between the shape of the temple, the way you place the megaliths together, and the effects that take place within it. After that, it's the way that the direction in which the temple is oriented to a specific star or constellation, which actually gives you the date of construction, because usually it's to do with the sun at the solstice or the equinox. And these things move over time. And also, a predominant amount of them are aligned towards Orion, the first time that Orion crosses over the horizon at that specific location, and that pins it right down. They were very big about mirroring the sky in the actual temple. So those are the fundamental principles that make up the temples that we know and love so well, and why they're still alive, and that's why we go to places like that and honor them.
Fascinating. So point to maybe one or two of these temples that are the biggest or the most popular that people could go and potentially have some kind of a spiritual experience.
Oh, I think Avebury. And now having said that, now I'm going to increase the mass tourism to Avebury.
Yeah, I was just
it's
there,
like I forget Stonehenge.
I was there a month ago, so yeah, Avebury is.
But Avebury is very
powerful.
important. You have access at all time of the day. And in fact, oddly enough, at night is the best time to go for me. The stones pop up much bigger than they are during the day, and you can step over the sheep while they're still sleeping. But the thing about Avebury is that back to the late John Burke, who was one of the people who first understood and measured the energy of crop circles, he took it to the next level. And he asked the same question that I was asking. Well, how do people describe these temples as being living organisms? They're just rocks. Well, Avebury, he went around placing hundreds of electrodes in the ground to measure what happens during the day. And the nuts and bolts of it was that he found that at night, all the readings around Avebury, they disappear. It's like the whole of the area goes to sleep. And then just before dawn, something very incredible happens. All the readings, all the magnetic and electric frequencies of the landscape are suddenly attracted to the henge, which is essentially the ditch around the stones. And it collects in there like a particle accelerator, and it starts spinning around from one end to the other. And then the moment that the actual sun crosses the horizon, a gate opens between the two portal stones that allows all this energy that's been building up in there for the last few hours to go into the actual temple like it's filling a cup, twice the frequency of the surrounding landscape. And John and other people have never been able to explain how a stone circle can do that. And again, it's to do what Pierre Moreau was saying. It's the shape that also attracts and amplifies the natural current of the land. So that was one great experiment that occurred. And the other one, he did the same thing at Stonehenge as well, found exactly the same thing was happening, where the energy at dawn opens at the two portal stones, and you have the horseshoe of stones at the center of Stonehenge. It's like a two-dimensional cup. All that energy goes right into the center, and it corrals in there. That's where the altar stone is. That's where you get altered, essentially. And this is why people like going there at dawn to do their prayers. The Druids that do their work at dawn. Even the Egyptian priests, when they first went to the temple, they go there just before dawn. They walk in, open the door, because no one ever lived in the temples. They were not meant to be lived in. And they go from room to room, waking the temple up, each room up as though the room is a person that's being woken up from slumber. It's a very romantic image, but they used to literally tone and sing to the room, and the temple comes back to life. Yeah, so basically they may not have understood the mechanics behind it, or maybe they did in their own way, but they validated exactly what Burke was doing with his experiments.
And when were these experiments going on?
So these would have been 1996 to 1998, I believe. And he actually wrote a book on it. If I'm getting my facts right here. We're going down amnesia lane yet again. I can't believe 1996, that was 30 years ago.
Yeah,
that's a long
crazy.
way. He wrote a book called Seed of Knowledge, which I don't mind promoting because it's very, very good. Because he took these experiments to the next stage, which is to find out how can you actually improve the economy of seeds and their ability to also get multiple crops out of seeds in one season. And he found the story in the Maya tradition that they took the seeds up to the top of the platforms in the temples like Chichen Itza, and they put them there and watch the sun basically do what it does, bring the light into the seed. And most people will say, well, that's basically just superstitious peasants going around taking the seeds to the top of a pyramid and having the sun god bless the seeds. No, there's more to that, he found out, because the energy, the way that the temple is built, the way that the slope angle of the pyramid of Kukulkan is built, allows that telluric current to go to the platform at certain times of the year, which are usually the traditional times when we celebrate the seasons. And there's an electrical current that actually impregnates itself into the seeds on the platform. And that's how the Maya got five... I'm starting to lose some adjectives here. They got 5 harvests in 1 year, as instead of 1, 2, or maybe 3, and they're able to keep a sizable population. So that book was very powerful in the way we understand how the temples are living organisms and how we should behave around them and also inside them. If you take your rubbish to a temple and you start complaining about your life, well, the temple's going to remember that and it's going to collect that. So I'm the next person that shows up, and I'm going to pick up that negative information. It's like I was saying back at the beginning of the interview, Matt. Part of what we do in our group, and we do this very quietly around the world, we clean up the mess that people leave behind at temples around the world. We don't put them back to the light, which is what you kind of want to do as a person who works with positive energy. No, that's my interpretation of the world. We reset it back to where it's supposed to be, neutral. Let it stay in the position where it was built, because we don't know any more than that. For me to impose my will on what I want is to do exactly what other people did when they went there before, to impose their negativity on the site. That's not going to improve things. It's just a matter of opinion. So we just reset it back to neutral and then let people go and do what they do best, which is either work with it or destroy it. That's how human nature is. Hopefully they'll improve on things over time.
Were there other studies done at Avebury to either support or to kind of invalidate the guy's Burke's work that he did in the 90s to write this book?
Not to my knowledge. That was pretty much a high watermark in terms of the research. There's been a lot of dowsing that's been done. Now that, but then it depends on your level of believability about dowsing. So dowsing is a very, very high profession where you really have to focus on the very subject that you're trying to find. And the object that you're holding is really the kind of reaction of your nervous system. It's your nervous system is the answer that you're getting from a collective environment, the spirit of place, if you want it. So let's say I'm looking for a telluric current running through this room, and if it happens to be here, I wanted to find the height of the current, the width of the current, and the reaction to my dowsing rods should be the exact position where the edge of the field should be. And they'll either do this or do that. If I'm looking for a Buick and I'll cross the room, I'll get no result because there is no Buick in the middle of the room. So you have to be very specific about what you're looking for when you're dowsing, extremely specific, down to the point where you have to write it down in a very long paragraph. And then you get this sort of twang through your body. It goes through your electrical circuits and it comes out through your fingertips on the very object that you're holding. And I mean, I've been dowsing for years, so I can tell you that having done it for 15 years, I don't need it anymore. I can see the energy where it is now. I can even see it around people. Again, anybody can do this. This is something that we're all born with. But it's just an extension of your own equipment, if you like. So that's a lot of dowsing has been done on the actual stones to show that they have an energy field also, which also expands and contracts relative to the length of the day. So at the end of the day, when people have been touching them and putting prayers, putting flowers on there, the stones have had enough. They've already, talked, and a lot of the information that was left in the stones by the wisdom keepers, by putting their intention into the quartz, if you go there under the right circumstances, you can pick up the information back into yourself as well. So they're almost like libraries, which is why the Druids were also hanging out with these places. They didn't build them. They inherited a lot of these stone circles, but they knew how to extract the knowledge of their predecessors by just tuning into the aura of the stone, linking their aura, and then there's an exchange of information between the two. But you've got to know what you're looking for. You've got to be, you have to go there with reverence, with understanding, without any judgment, and certainly no expectation. If you expect something to happen, it's coming from here. It's coming from your own ego because you want to feel special. It's like, oh, I went to talk to a stone and look what I learned. Yeah, it came right from you. How I usually do it is I go up to and I used to live around the corner from Avebury for many years. It was part of my classroom, and I just go up to one of the stones and I said, I don't know what I'm looking for, but I need some help sorting something out. And I'd walk around, and nothing happens, and then a stone would go, wait, psst. Not quite like that, and I feel like the stone's trying to pull me in. And I just stand there or sit down with my back to it and expect nothing. And sometimes you get an image or a vision or a voice or a sound, and I take my notepad out and I start writing the weirdest stuff. I thought, well, if this is true, that would be quite incredible. And then I go home, sleep on it, and then someone sends me a book on something, and I turn to page 15, and there's the answer to the very thing that the stone was telling me. So it's almost like a communication device, a natural reference library. And it's how I do a lot of my initial work, communicating with the spirit of place to find out what's going on here. What is this about? How can I be a better teacher to people about helping them to understand why people a long time ago put this here with big rocks? Because they did it for a good reason, not just because to show that they're so damn clever that they can move a 400-ton rock and keep it upright for 8,000 years. There's more to it than that. I need to know this. And I let it go, and slowly the information, like magnetism, finds its way into my field of consciousness. And that's how the process begins. And then I start backing it up with facts, science, physics, and so forth. It's part of the magic of what I do and why I quit my day job.
Love it, love it. Any other sites that are big stone energetic sites that are worth mentioning before we kind of move on?
Oh, how many days have you got?
We got about an hour.
I can tell you Stonehenge is drained. The mass tourism does not help.
Yeah.
I remember the last time going there, and you can get special access, but it's getting harder to accomplish now. And it's also very expensive. And they're not supposed to be charging you admission, by the way. It's against the law, and it's written in the law. But we won't go there. The last time I went to Stonehenge, it was like watching a bunch of bored teenagers smoking a cigarette beside the school shed. But if you go basically around, if you get private access, and I used to get private access back in the late 90s, just 2 people going in there at night. The guys were really lovely people. Their stories will blow your mind, completely blow your mind. And you get there for 2 hours and they behave differently. You go there and say, thank you for letting me be here in your home. And the stones expand. It's hard to say that. The stones expand into beings, and you walk in and you're inside this family enclosure. It's a wonderful relationship. The Great Pyramid, only private access will give you a good hit on that, again, because people have been misusing it all day long for all the wrong reasons, usually for selfies. The Red Pyramid and the Bent Pyramid are very important. Sacsayhuaman in Peru is quite a powerful place, as is Pumapunku on Lake Titicaca. That is very, very raw energy. It's not for everybody. And if you really want to get a hit of what a real portal looks like, and I mean a portal where physical things actually go through it, the locals are very wary of it. They keep a certain distance of it in respect, not so much out of fear. There's a place called Amurumuru, which means the portal of the long-bearded man of Mu. Which is this T-shaped doorway cut on the hillside of sandstone on the edge of Lake Titicaca in Bolivia. Actually, it's on the Peru side of Lake Titicaca. And the last time I was there with the group, only a few days before, someone had literally been sucked into the portal, disappeared, and they had to file a police report because the guy was missing at the hotel, and they had to account for why one of the people in the group was missing. And they
This was
said,
on your tour?
not my tour, it was the tour before mine. And my guide there, he's very aware of what goes on in that portal, and even he doesn't go there anywhere near this place after the sun starts going down. And even I'm picking up on it as I'm there with him. And I said, no, let's come back in the morning. I feel like I'm being sucked into this thing, and I got work to do.
That's it there?
Yeah, this is it. And that T, by the way, it's a recurring symbol. That is the Tao, or the Tai Yi, and it's literally means the breath of the god. And that's one of the fundamental teachings that happens also in Japan, in China. The pillars of Göbekli Tepe, or if you want to call it by its real name, Portasar, anytime you see this shape, it's essentially the breath of God. So either there's a teaching associated with it, or it's a vibrational element that helps you connect with the other world. And in this case, it's both. It's a place of teaching, and it's also a telluric current that flows through that shape. And under certain conditions, it will suck people in there. And they come back a couple of days later very dazed and confused, as this guy did, because the police actually filed the report of a missing person. And at one point, they're even considering a murder inquiry because they thought, well, maybe they drowned him in the lake or something, because they're saying the guy went into the portal. But then they also recognized that the local people also been saying that, towards the sunset, we don't go anywhere near it because we see people coming in and going out. And we're not talking about ghosts. We're talking about real people. And the locals keep a respectful distance away from it, knowing what goes on there. So I, for one, believe that story because I put my face to the door when we're there, just as the sun was descending. And just to get the experience, because I like to talk from experience. It's much more fun. And I put my head to the door. It's like a red laser was coming straight at my third eye. And I thought, okay, I've experienced enough. I feel like I'm getting sucked into this thing. We'll come back in the morning. And it's a completely different energy in the morning. It's very welcoming, very clear, very clean. That's a pretty live one. Possibly the most live one I've actually experienced in my life. The Osirian at Abydos, that's a very live thing as well. Mostly because not many people have been in there since it was cleaned up and since the water level dropped down. I was one of the first people in recent memory to actually have the privilege, even though I paid for it, to actually go and put my bare feet on the platform just when the water was dropped enough, because they're trying to siphon the water out of a spring upon which it's built. So it's every day the water comes back, and then they drain it and it comes back. And no one had been there for God knows how many decades, and I can tell you, it was like my body was struck by a car battery. This electrical current just went right up my feet, through my spine, right up to my head. And I didn't know if Tuesdays came in twos. My name was Mary or Bob. It didn't matter. I was completely dazed for like half an hour. Powerful stuff. So that's just a few of them, but usually the small ones and the ones that don't get that much attention tend to be the most important because they've not been polluted by human folly. One in New Zealand comes to mind, and it literally is called the birthplace of the gods. And it's 12,000 years old. There's a direct alignment between its calendar stone and the first rising of the belt stars of Orion in 10,500 BC on the spring equinox, exactly the same date that they were building the pyramids of Giza. And the people that they ascribe to building the birthplace of the gods are described in the same way by the indigenous people of New Zealand, called the Waitaha, with exactly the same physical description and mannerism as the followers of Horus in Egypt, which is an incredible connection. But at that temple, it's one of the few places that I've been where I can just sit in front of one of the stones, and each one of them represents a teaching that the gods left there. So you go there under a certain frame of mind, and you sit there and you collect your information. And I remember sitting in front of the main stone called Marotini, the goddess of the site, and it was like watching someone drop a film projector in front of me, and there it is, on top of the hill, right on top of the very perimeter of the hill. I've been there 6 times, and it's like a drug. I can't get enough of it. I remember watching the screen coming down in front of me, and I was shown animals that died at the end of the Ice Age, the area covered with forests, glaciers, incredible amounts of information, and it led me to essentially form the foundation of one of my books called The Missing Lands, which I want to talk about the gods and where they came from and what they built and where they came from. That's essentially what the whole story began, just by having that connection with that site. And I didn't even know the history about it when I was there. That's, again, just to validate that it doesn't come from my own imagination. I only found out about the story after I found out the oral tradition from the grandmothers of the Waitaha. And they literally connected all the dots. And I'd already experienced what they were telling me about. So that's one place you've got to be on your bucket list.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And like all the
beautiful.
Good things in life, it's hard to get to.
Yeah, no doubt about that. New Zealand's tough. But you mentioned drugs.
Drugs?
You mentioned that this was like a drug, that you couldn't get enough of it. Have drugs been involved in any of your visions and seeing any of these things that you've seen, or had any of these experiences?
No.
Okay.
They get in the way.
Yeah.
And they really do. Even alcohol gets in the way. No, I like to talk from direct experience without any judgment, preconceived notion, or any expectation that anything will happen. And it's always been that way. It wasn't something that someone told me. It's just something that I felt. I just go there, experience something, and I say, well, that was interesting. How did that come about? And boom, and now you're onto research. And I find, actually, and having talked to Graham Hancock about this, who tried me once to get me up to New York with another writer to do ayahuasca, and he said, well, great benefits. I said, well, like what? Well, you have to fast for like 24 hours. I said, well, I'm a Taurian. I don't fast. I eat. Okay, but apart from that, well, and then you lose control of your bodily fluids. So you're going to be near a toilet. I said, okay. And then you vomit a lot. Lovely, Graham. That's fantastic. But then you get the visions. Oh, the vision. Okay, so what happens? Well, the first you see the brightly colored serpents. And I'm a cobra-phobic. I mean, I have a fear of snakes. It's a phobia of snakes. I said, Graham, you know what?
So you're all in.
I'm totally in at this point. I said, I can get the same effect by standing to a large upright rock and get the same effects without the all additional extras. And it comes much more direct because from what I've been told from a lot of these shamans in South America, who actually said that San Pedro cactus is a much easier process than ayahuasca, and you get the same effects. The visions are real, but a lot of it's to do with the chemical reaction with your brain. So the visions are a mixture of the two, and they're very helpful for a lot of people, especially with emotional issues. So I'm not putting it down in any way. But the thing is, it's not the real experience. The real experience is being clean and connecting with the spirit of place, with the energy of place, and leaving the body for a prescribed amount of time. And if you got the time and the location, 3 days, physically leaving the body and coming back with pure information. That's how it works. And there's not many people doing that kind of thing these days because of, well, health and safety and lawyers. Because, telling your lawyer that, well, I'm going to go to Guatemala, I am going to take a poison 3 times a day, and then I'm having an induced near-death experience, I'm leaving the body, and I'm coming back with pure information about how the universe works. And the lawyer will say, well, you're going to have to write these disclaimers here. There's 15 pages of disclaimers because, well, there's a 50% chance that it might not work the way you want. So they're very serious about that. When you do this, you have to give away at least 8 months of your life to learn the process. And part of the process is to control fear and control your emotion, because you take those into the other world, you won't find your way back. You get completely disoriented, and you'll never find your way back into the body. And every other year, someone pays 15 grand to go into the box of the King's Chamber, because that's one of the reasons why that building was built. And they leave the body, and then they can't find their way back. And in the morning, the guards find a dead person inside the box because the soul can't find its way back. Leaving is easy. I've done that. Getting back is the hard part. So
how many deaths have there been inside the sarcophagus?
I don't know, but it's quite regular. Once every couple of years. I know one person that was. He's been on one of my tours 5 times now, and I've watched him grow spiritually over the years. He also practices a lot of Eastern traditions, and he says, "No, I actually paid. It was actually 15 grand that year. They were short of money." And it was worth every penny. And I'm glad it took me 10 years to learn the process, to go for the right process of, fasting, preparing myself mentally, the emotional thing, learning to control my fear, and also learning the procedure for finding a way back into the physical body. The instructions for which are still written on the walls of the tomb of Tutmosis III in the Valley of the Kings, the only chamber where no one is physically buried in the whole of that valley. That guy is buried on the other side of the hill in the Temple of Hatshepsut. And it's got 437 instructions, I believe, that you have to memorize over the course of 3 years to leave the body and then find your way back into your empty vessel 3 days later, and then be declared raised from the dead. And that was in 1300 BC. And that was a tradition that was already 5,000 years old in India, which is the tradition of Mithras, who was essentially the foundation of the story of Jesus, even though Jesus was a real person. And that tradition was borrowed from the 17 ways of the gods that go back to Japan around 8,000 BC, which is the shape of the T that we saw earlier, the Tao or the Tai, the 17 Tai of the gods. So it's a very, very old tradition of initiation and how to discover knowledge and truth in its pure state. Rather than the perception of knowledge and truth, which is what we have down here. A lot of opinions, a lot of conjecture, but real truth, as Plato said, can only be found in the other world. There's no other place where you can find this. And he should know because he actually underwent the process. And he couldn't write about it directly. He had to suggest it through his fictional characters, especially in Timaeus. He talks about his own initiation experience, and he says, it helped me shape my metaphysical doctrine. So that's Plato, and Pythagoras did it 5 times. He was a junkie, literally, for leaving the body and going to getting information. And I suspect a lot of his mathematics came from that understanding of what he'd learned when he was on the other side.
Why did you mention the Great Pyramid being built for a specific reason 12,000 years ago, did you say? What was the specific reason?
It's a long story, and I'll try and cut it short, at least as best as I can. So we have, let's say, if you follow Robert Bauval and Adrian Gilbert's theory, that the ground plan of the Giza Plateau, 12,450, 12,500 BC, there's a hair between those 2 dates. Orion does not move that much in 50 years. So you have that occurring on the spring equinox. And the people that were behind it, which were still written about by Arab chroniclers, and it's written about on the walls of the Temple of Edfu, not about the pyramid itself, but about the gods that came here to form the foundations of the historic temples. It's all on the walls. They're called the Aku Shamsu Hor, Shining Ones, Followers of Horus. Very tall, red-headed, elongated skulls, light-skinned. They came from a sunken land in the middle of the Indian Ocean, not far from where the Saudi Arabia Peninsula is today. And we left it at that. When I learned about the Waitahara in New Zealand, I found that they originally had lived in Easter Island back at the time when the Ice Age still hadn't happened. So we're over 12,000 years ago. And every year the tribe used to meet with the gods called the Urukeu, who are very tall, red-headed or blonde, light-skinned, and so forth and so forth and so forth. And they came there every year on a double hull catamaran from a big land in the east where they already had established a temple city, which is called Tiwanaku, which is the place of the shining people. Literally, that's what it means. And they would stop in Easter Island, and they said, we were living there when it was an archipelago, not as an island as it is today. It was still an archipelago. Now, you'd only know that if you're an oceanographer, because you wouldn't understand anything about sea level rise, especially at the time at the end of the Ice Age, to understand that there was a lot more landmass around Easter Island. So they said that every year the gods would arrive. They would take on water and fresh supplies to go onto the birthplace of the gods in New Zealand, but not before leaving wisdom with the 3 houses of the Waitaha. And each house had 3 baskets. And each basket, metaphorically, was a collection point for knowledge. One basket was where the architects, the thinkers and the planners put their work. So if you build something like this, you'll get this kind of effect. Okay, we'll put that into that basket. Middle basket was for the people who actually did stuff like builders. We will build what the thinkers and the architects had planned for us. Very practical basket of information. And then the last basket was where the shamans of the tribe put in their information about the universe, how to work with non-physical realities. And I said, well, that's very fascinating, but tell me more, because you got my interest, because it suggests to me, offhand, you're talking about the belt stars of Orion, because every culture has this story as well about the belt stars being the place from where, the gods came from originally, a long, long time ago, and in some cases, where humans came from originally as well. And I've heard that in 2 cases from traditional people. And they said, exactly, each one of these represents the belt stars of Orion. We have Mintaka, Alnilama, Nalilak. And I said, wait a minute, let me just project what you just told me onto the Giza Plateau, because all the stories that I've heard of people going into the small pyramid, which represents Mintaka, I've never heard anyone having a spiritual experience in there. You go in there, it's like someone's thinking. It's a heaviness, but it's a creative heaviness about that building. And you go into the middle pyramid, which represents Al-Nilam, I believe, and it's kind of boring. You go into the central chamber, and it's like, well, it's nice, but it's kind of practical, and nothing's really happening in here. Yeah, it's practical because it was supposed to represent all the practical people, the people that actually put things into motion. And the only people that talked about any kind of spiritual experience always happens in the Great Pyramid, which also conforms to that particular belt star and also to that particular basket in the tradition. So what the grandmothers were describing exactly juxtaposes on the experiences of people and the stars represented on the Giza Plateau. So there's 3 levels of connection there, and I kind of like that juxtaposition, especially as the gods in Easter Island are described in the same way as the builder gods of Egypt, and on the other side of the planet. And the people in South America have exactly the same story. You can't make this stuff. If these people weren't connecting with each other back then because they were rudimentary hunters and gatherers, well, the only way you can have the same story is if they were moving across the planet. And that's what the that's what the Aymara said in South America. They were great seafarers. The gods were great seafarers, and the Egyptians were here. There's Egyptian language in South America. How do you explain that? There's Egyptian language all the way through the Pacific. Some of the islands, for example, Fiji, Ra'iatea. It means the white-skinned people of Ra. Now, what's that doing in the Pacific, I wonder? So I find the story very convincing because it's spoken by many people halfway across the world who supposedly never got in touch with each other.
Speaking of great seafaring people, the Knights Templar, you're from Portugal, I guess, right?
Yeah, I was born in Templar Central.
Yeah, right.
First Templar nation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had Timothy Hogan on the show. It was one of the more popular episodes, and he was telling us about how they sailed from Portugal into the New World, and some of the history there from his perspective. So, what are your thoughts on Templar? You're doing a lot of research on them lately, I guess, right?
Yeah, I had a book that became a bestseller in Portugal, and which was a big surprise. I beat Dan Brown to #1. And Dan Brown was my neighbor in New Hampshire.
Oh, wow.
I thought, yes. He's a nice guy, actually. I like him. I wanted to write a book about... it was really kind of a stopgap motion. I was in between books, and I thought, maybe I should write a book about the Templars and the obsession that Portugal has with the Templars, where even the civic calendar was set by the Templars on the day of Mary Magdalene. And I thought, that's unusual. That would have got the church's ire because you weren't supposed to talk about Mary Magdalene, and they got away with it. And, it was a thin little book at one point, and then I stopped because I hit a roadblock. Something wasn't making sense. I didn't get the foundation of what the Templars were up to. And I had to go away and learn about something completely different because before I understood what was really going on. And I suddenly remembered what one of my teachers at school in London had taught me when I was 12. If you want to know the how things become what they are, go back 100 years to find out where things began. And I thought, let me look back at Europe. And that's when I began to take an interest in Holy Blood, Holy Grail. And I'll give them due credit. They really helped my understanding of the atmosphere of the period at the time and helped me find out that the Templars go back at least 80 years before they were called the Knights of the Temple. And there were three organizations. There was the Order of the Temple, the Cistercian the Cistercian Order of Monks, who were formed on the same day as the County of Portugal, which is a great irony in life. And then there's the Order of Sion, not the Priory, the Order of Sion. There's three groups working together like a holy trinity to create something incredible. And what they were trying to do is they were trying to create a utopia in Europe when it was an economy based on plunder. The main item on any menu in Europe at the time was human flesh. A lot of cannibalism happening at the time, and there was also a mini ice age going on. And the church controlled everything and everyone. They were trying to get away from all of this, and I learned very early on they were not following any Jesus tradition or any accepted Christian tradition. They were following the tradition of John the Baptist. The treasure they talked about, and this will surprise a lot of people, how the Templars were very rich and they were going for treasure. Yeah, but you got to understand the word treasure back in the day. It's not what we call it today. It wasn't about money. It was the foundation of thesauro, which is with the foundation of the etymology of the word thesaurus, which is a book filled with words. And that book, filled with very important words, was the only thing that the Templars cared about. And it was called the Ginza, which translates from Mandean as treasure. The treasure was the words written by John the Baptist, and that's why they were following his tradition. So their idea is to reestablish the concept of the divine bloodline of Mary Magdalene and John the Baptist in Europe at a time when hell was breaking loose. They wanted to form a utopia that could achieve the highest achievements of humanity. Women were put on the same level as men. Anybody could worship whatever they wanted without any juxtaposition of other people's beliefs. They wouldn't be killed for what they believed. And everybody worked together to create a sanctuary where any surplus would be given to the next town. Any profit would be tithed so they can help the next town. And that's how an interrelated web of towns and cities came together to self-support themselves to create these patchworks of enlightenment across Europe. And they got away with it for pretty much 90 to 100 years before the corruption sets in from the outside and the church figured out what was going on. So it was a huge spiritual endeavor. And the one thing that got me, and when the penny finally dropped, when I was going through a lot of the old Templar sites, is that they weren't really going after any site willy-nilly. They were actually putting their fortresses around original temples dedicated to Isis or her local doppelganger. They were protecting the spiritual places, exactly as the head of the Templars was saying, who was Bernard of Clairvaux, the head of the Cistercian order. He said, you have to understand the spiritual context of the land. You don't fight for physical riches, you fight for spiritual riches. That is the sign of the true warrior. And they are actually following that because when they came back from Jerusalem, they didn't do any killing. They did some protecting of their territory, but they spent most of their time building churches, reconsecrating old temples, and certainly protecting all the temples dedicated to Isis, especially in Portugal. And that penny dropped very rapidly. And I said, yeah, they were following a spiritual tradition. And that's why people loved them and they gave them their wealth. That's how they became really wealthy, because they were giving something to others to elevate the human condition. And it was a great privilege to be involved in that project because it sucks up 15 years of my life, and most of my brain molecules are in that book. And it's one of my greatest achievements. I'm very proud of it. And it helped me to really understand the Templars for who they were. And it survives today. I mean, they kept changing their business card because the church was, it took them 400 years to understand what was really going on. And once they figured out what the Templars were up to, they would change their name to Rosicrucians or the White Brotherhood or the Invisible College, and so on and so forth. And when they got to Scotland, they did an even better one. They just changed their name to Scottish Rite Freemasonry, not the London Rite. There's a completely different Freemasonic system to the Scottish Rite. And they're still pretty much practicing what the Templars used to preach. And yet, what the Templars were doing was a 1,000-year-old version of what the Essenes were doing. And they behaved the same way as the Essenes, who were practicing something called the way. So when Jesus says, follow me, I am the way, he wasn't saying, no, you got to follow me because I'm an important guy. No, I represent a teaching called the way. And that way is what we showed earlier in Peru with the T-shaped door. It's called the Taiyi, which means the way. So 8,000 years of teaching spread all the way across from Japan, China, all the way to the Near East. And eventually the Templars pick it up, and it's still spreading around the world as Scottish Rite Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, and so on and so forth. So it's still alive and well to this very day. So that came from a little pamphlet I thought I was going to write, which turns out to be a massive book about this big, which it'll do your head in. But and my favorite part is that I leave the punchline till the very last paragraph. So don't go looking at the last paragraph. It will ruin the book for you. But I always wanted to do a book where I take you in a big journey, and it is a big and very complex journey, and then I twist a knife at the end, and you don't see it coming. Something I learned from Ian McEwan, the writer, one of my favorite novelists.
Do you think that the Templar have Jesus's bones?
No. Because they did not see Jesus being absolutely important in the big scheme of things. They respected him for what he was, but everyone, and I researched this at length for another book about resurrection, was that everyone in the Near East, and even the Middle East at the time of Jesus, didn't accept him to be that important a guy because they said, what he's done, 1,000 million people have done before him. This is a very, very old tradition. And of course, they're absolutely right, because the original 17 ways are in Japan. Ironically brought there at the end of the flood by two creator gods who escape a sinking continent and teach hunter-gatherers how to go about doing things properly. So I don't think that was what they're looking for. No, the most important thing that they held on to was the mummified head of John the Baptist, which is where the church also got wrong because of one of their informants who managed to get into the second tier of the inner brotherhood before he was found out and he got the boot. He said, they're worshipping this devil called Baphomet. Oh, well, in that case, we've got to get rid of the Templars because that's not good. That's blasphemy and blah, 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 blah. And the problem is they mistranslated what Baphomet is. It's actually an Arabic term. The Arabs and the Templars were always working together, especially the Sufi side of Islam. And Abaphohilame, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, means the source or the head of wisdom. And that was the head of John the Baptist. That's the only thing they cared about because that was their particular god.
If they realized that other people cared about it, then they might have picked it up at the same time, though, I guess, right? Tim Hogan was on, and he said that they picked up Jesus's bones, John the Baptist's bones, Mary Magdalene, and their combined children. It was a big claim. It is
a big claim.
It was a mass, and that wasn't the biggest part of the claim. He said that they had elongated skulls.
No, that I haven't heard at all.
Okay,
and
yeah.
I haven't seen a shred of evidence to back that up.
Yeah.
I would find the Jesus claim very hard to believe because of their behavior. Anything to do with John the Baptist, absolutely, I believe, and Mary Magdalene especially, because one of the side projects that I ended up doing on there, which I didn't take, because it was already 15 years into the project, and the idea of trying to understand where the gods came from and understanding how sacred space works was building up, and I had books to write and projects to do. I said, it's got to stop at some point, because my head is literally aching by this point. I mean, at 800 references, it's ludicrous. And I said, I've stumbled upon, and I remember the day it happened, I was in Harvard. I literally went on my knees because someone hacked into Harvard's website, and they found that they had a very rare book written by a Cistercian monk. There's only 2 copies of it. One was in Lisbon, and I didn't want to spend $4,000 flying to Lisbon just to read the book, mostly because I didn't have it. But the other copy was in Harvard. It was bequeathed to Harvard, and they found it there. And I said, I'm going to go on my knees and get in there. So I did, got on my knees. And they checked me out while I was there. And also a letter came from my local library in Portland just to sort of back me up. I said, this guy's onto something. He needs help. And they checked me out right there. Said, oh, you've published some very interesting things. Whether we agree with them or not doesn't matter. But okay, I'll tell you what. We'll give you 5 entrances into Harvard good for 1 year, including free parking, which is worth the price in itself in Boston. And sure enough, big book written on animal skin, this big, that big. Takes 2 guys to bring it out of some underground vault. And somewhere on page 635, because they had no index, I let out an expletive in the middle of Harvard, and I remember all the scholars turning around to me, and I could hear their heads going, this guy's found something original. And I went, absolutely. I actually found the swearing-in ceremony of the Templar master in Portugal, in the middle of which he says, I swear to protect the bloodline of David. And I said, now, why would that be important as a line item in Portugal if the bloodline was in France? I said, I bet the bloodline's here in Portugal as well, because if I was pregnant with, and apparently Mary Magdalene, as far as we know, had 3, possibly 4 children. 2 of them, I believe, ended up in France, which is where the work of Henry Lincoln and Michael Bagent and is it Henry Lee, they took their information, so I borrowed that from them. Another one is suggested up in Rosslyn in Scotland, and the hypothesis is very, very solid at this point. And then I was looking at symbols and little sort of nuances of nod and a wink. If you know what you're looking for, you know the language that's written on things that's in Portugal as well, in a specific town in Portugal, north of Évora. And it relates to the king's brother, who was the nephew of Bernard of Clairvaux. And he talks about the fact that they're going to split the Templar Brotherhood in Portugal. And I thought, why would you split the Brotherhood if they're doing very well? And you look at the logo, and it's the logo of the Divine Bloodline mixed in with the Templar logo. And I went, it can't be that obvious, surely. So I kept it in the back of my head because I didn't want to go in that direction. I didn't have the money or the inclination. I wanted someone a little bit with more in-depth understanding to go in that direction. So I'm friends with the head of the Eastern Star in the United States, and she said, I'm going to go to a conclave in Belgium. Is there anything you want me to ask of the Masons? I said, I do, actually. Asked them if the bloodline or part of the bloodline is in Portugal, because if I had a bank account with that much value, I would split my money into 4 different accounts. I wouldn't keep them in one bank account. And same with children. I'd split the lineage up. One goes to France, one to Scotland, and one into Portugal, which is where they had a kingdom within a kingdom. It was safe from ecclesiastical interference. So what better place to keep the children of Mary Magdalene or the bloodline of Mary Magdalene? Okay, I'll do that. So she comes back 10 days later, and she says, well, I got a very good reaction from them. I said, what? Well, the room went very quiet when I said this, and the head mason smiled at me and says, tell your friend he's got his nose very deep into the honeypot. And that's all they said. And I said, that's good enough for me. Yeah, because some secrets need to be kept secret, and I respect that for their own protection. So, but yeah, I'm glad that things are alive and well. Who knows? It could be me. I might own a castle somewhere. There might be someone looking for me right now to hand me a vineyard and a big castle. I mean, it might have 1 wall out of 3, but still, it's a castle.
Yeah, could be. Well, awesome, man. That's super cool stuff. So what did we miss, if anything, in this conversation? What are any big topics that you...
Oh, God, we could go on forever. I mean, if you tie all this conversation together, and we've covered about 1/10 of the whole thing, the one thing that ties it all up, I think it goes back to the spiritual resurrection of humanity. That's what the one thing that I can always go back to. What links crop circles to temples, to upright rocks, to initiation. Initiation means to become conscious. That's what it means. And the way that people over the last 3,000 years have been undergoing this near-death ritual to come back resurrected from the dead, or the risen, or the newly born, depending on which culture you're in, tells me that the benefit of hanging out with sacred space is to discover yourself and your purpose in life. Now, if you can do that while you're living, you're doing pretty well. You can make the best of your life here, and you've got an edge up on the process, because if you think about it, the whole paradox of life is that part of your soul incarnates into the body and forgets about everything. You have to start from scratch. So you spend the whole of your life watching podcasts, reading books, going to lectures, going on tours to rediscover yourself and your place in the bigger scheme of things. Well, if you go into these environments where the laws of physics are ever so slightly different, that allows you to escape physical reality, even if just for one moment, and come back completely aware of information that you went there to retrieve and apply that in your real life, you become much better than the sum of your parts, because you suddenly become aware of your purpose in life, and you basically walk your life awake and with purpose. And I can't think of a better reason to engage with sacred space than that, because it makes every minute of your life worth living. And again, if people are saying, well, life is horrible, you have a horrible birth, there's a horrible life, and you die, yeah, but you're missing the point here. The point is to have the experience. You came here to have the experience. If you're aware of the purpose of your soul in this lifetime, then you're making really good progress. And that's what people like the Apostle Thomas and Philip wrote about in their banned Gospels, because they claimed, and I quote, you have to experience death while you live. You can't wait until physical death, because if you do, you'll end up with nothing, and you end up nothing but fear and pain. If you understand if you experience death while you live, then you are a well-prepared light being. That's what the Egyptians said as well. And Plato as well said the same thing. True philosophers make dying their profession. In other words, to experience through initiation the concept of a metaphoric death, discovering knowledge, bringing it back and applying it and putting it to good use in your daily life is the high point of your soul's purpose here on earth. And the Templars were practicing it because they did the same thing in restricted chambers in all their preceptories.
When you say your soul, who is it that has a soul?
All of us. Even this microphone has a soul. Everything that's living, anything that's organic, anything that has atomic structure has a kind of an entity that forms the expression of what it is. So the way I explain it is that there's me, and then there's me housed inside of this physical body. This is not what I am or who I am. This is an outward expression of who I really am. And yet only 30% of the soul incarnates at any given moment into your physical body in any given lifetime. The rest of it is out there having a great time. So between 2 and 4 in the morning, when, going back to the conversation about gravity, when gravity thins just a little bit where you happen to be living, your soul leaves the body and goes on REM sleep, reconnects with itself, goes walk about in these incredible landscapes and connects with people you've never met. And your brain, meanwhile, has not had that experience in the physical world. So how is it able to make up all of these fictitious landscapes and people if it has no direct experience of them? Well, that's because your soul has gone back to reconnect with itself. And then 4 in the morning, when the window of opportunity closes with the gravitational field, you come back into the body and you wake up and you go over to the bathroom. So that's how I think that the soul really works. It's part of an entity which has had billions of incarnations. We all have. But this time, you come here to do something very specific, and that's the paradox. You forget why you came here. And if you're lucky, earlier on in life, you discover your purpose and you achieve that purpose. Even if you reach your deathbed and you still understand why you came here, what you got right and what you didn't get right, you still would have achieved the purpose.
So, check, and I'm curious about the 30% and how you think you know that part of the soul that leaves and the rest of it stays, and how that separation occurs. But pause on the question and think about it for a second. When you say your soul, who is it that has a soul? So when I say my soul, or when you say your soul, well, pause on me for a second. My soul. So there's a soul within me, you're saying?
The soul resides within and around the physical body.
And so who am I?
Only you know.
Right. So when you say my soul, it implies duality. It implies that there's possession of a soul.
Yeah.
And so it implies that there is someone that has a soul. Your soul, my soul. It implies that there's 2 of us here, not just me and you, but we each have a soul. So there's 4 of us talking to each other right now. If
We're all secretly double Geminis.
Right.
Yes.
So when you say my soul, who am I?
That's the big question. And if you start thinking about it, your brain will just have a meltdown, because your soul is huge. I mean, for example, me, my soul, as I understand it, I'm still understanding who I am. there's an ego involved. I mean, we all have an ego, which is essentially, if you want to break it down into its constituent parts, it's kind of a midpoint between your brain synthesizing life intellectually and also trying to understand what the soul is. It's like a midpoint between things. So in my perception, I have the physical vessel, I have my brain, which intellectualizes the ego, which is the thinking part, the conscious part, but then there's also the soul around there that's actually feeding my ego and my brain the information. And I'm trying to understand what that soul is, and I'm making a bit of progress. I'm beginning to understand what I'm about, but I also understand that it is so large and so complicated because of so many billions of experiences that I can't hope to possibly understand it, and it'll drive me crazy anyway. The best I can do is understand a finite portion of my soul to bring out the elements I need to help me in this lifetime. So I'm using me to help me in my body in this lifetime to do what I came here to do.
So who are you?
Does that make sense?
No. So when you say you mentioned that you have a soul, that you have a mind, that you have an ego, that you have a body. Who is this person that has all of this? It's
the soul.
It's the soul.
Yeah.
Right.
The ultimate you.
Right.
Which you won't understand until you physically die and reconnect with it. Or
so the soul doesn't have a soul. The soul is the soul.
I don't think the soul has a soul.
No.
Then it'll get really complicated. And in fact, if I can, I'm thinking about a time when, again, we're in session with Isabel and she's in trance. And I'd asked this question about the whole point of life. And the whole room just expanded. Like some other entity just came in. And I said, hello, who's this? They said, we are a collective called the Nine. I said, the Council of Nine? I said, some people call us that. But that's just an approximation. I thought, wow. So are you the creator? Oh, no, we're not the creator. Can you see the creator? Yes, we can. Someone said, good question. I said, about bloody time we got to the nuts and bolts of this. And they said, no, we can see the creator. It's just light. It's love. That's it. Yeah, it's just light and love. Don't you want to know what it is? Well, no, because we've experienced life trillions and trillions and trillions of times. We've accumulated so many experiences, and now we're guiding younger souls like you. One day you'll be here doing what we're doing to younger souls that are being born at the same time. But if we find out what the source is, we'll merge back with it and we lose our identity and we have to start from scratch again. And I thought, that's really amazing. So you're saying that you have an individual soul, but you're connected to a collective. Said, yeah, we're all connected to a collective. We don't have the ability like you have when your soul chooses to incarnate into your body to lose that tether back to the collective. And there's the paradox. We spend the rest of our life here in the physical planet trying to get back to the collective to understand why we're here. And they are jealous that we've done that because they are tethered to each other, even though they are individual souls, but they're part of a collective. It's a bit like a universal web of consciousness. And if they don't know the answer, they'll just snip onto the next electrical circuit, and that soul will have that contact for them. And that's what they said. That's why we envy any soul that dares to go into the physical body, because we know how difficult it is, and that's why we exist, to help you. And if you ask us, and if you connect in a certain manner, whether it's prayer, going to a sacred site or so forth, or ayahuasca, we will send you suggestions and ideas to help you on your journey, but you have got to kick the ball through the goalpost. That's the exact phrase.
Yeah, you mentioned having an ego, having a mind, having a soul, having a body, and it's like, well, who is it that has all this stuff? Well, I think one of the biggest realizations that humanity can have is that they don't have a soul; they are a soul. That they're
collective.
That there isn't, not collective at the individual level. I mean that they are literally, when we say all of these things that I have as if they're my possessions, it's what we're really talking about is the image of myself.
Yeah.
We're talking about the entity that I'm identified as, whether it's the character, my movie character within the Matrix, it's my avatar, it's the ego. It's all of it. It's all of it combined, and it's the entity that has all of these possessions: the body, the mind, the soul, the car, the job, all of these things that we're identified with, that we self-label as, that we're conditioned to think that we are. And I think if we don't get out of that mindset of my soul, then we don't, it's not true speech. It's not where we really haven't realized who we are and what we are when we're still in a place where we're talking about my soul, and it, because it's duality. It's there's one, and when you realize that we are a soul, then you realize that there's not really, possessions aren't really real. These things that we have are not. If we are spiritual, if we are life, which I think it's hard to argue against the fact that we are alive and that we are life itself, then it becomes a lot more clear, and we speak in more true speech, I think, and we realize one of the primary awakenings that human beings can have is that we are life itself. We're not this image of ourselves. We're we're alive. We're life. So yeah.
Oh, I'd say that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's another way of looking at it.
Yeah.
And like they said, like all the people that have actually experienced this process of experiencing death while you live, they talk about the same thing.
Right.
You only really get the truth on the other side.
Right.
That's where all the facts are. We're approximating it.
Yeah.
And sometimes words don't capture the essence because it's such a amorphous concept and a complex as well.
I don't think we're ever going to capture it unless we start speaking about it in real terms.
Yeah.
You know?
Or unless you experience the actual leaving and coming back.
Yeah, those people get it. The near-death experiencers get it, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, when I had when I was in the box in the King's Chamber, because we took turns going into the box, and that was also a weird thing. I got brought back, and I left, and I'm not allowed to go back in the box because I enjoyed it too much. It was too peaceful and too serene and too lovely. I felt like so many people that I miss are there. And I said, I'm done. I'm just done with all the pain and all the anxiety of being on Earth. But then I realized, but I chose this for a reason. I'm not going to take the easy way out. But at the same time, I know if I'm allowed to go in there for a certain amount of time, I'm not coming back into the body because it was so fun. But I've also recognized that whenever I tried to push that, the management pushed me back into the body. And I remember a time a few years ago when one of the people in the group said, but you want to go into the box. I said, I know I want to go into the box, but I am self-censoring, okay, because I can't run a tour when I'm dead. Very inconvenient. And it'll be showing off if I could. And I said, all right, I'll tell you what, time me. Don't let me be in the box for more than 32 seconds. Okay, so I go into the box. And again, the process is very simple. And here's a weird thing. That box in the King's Chamber is exactly the length of my body, right down to the flat of my head, the exact width of my shoulders, which is really freaky, by the way. And I just close my eyes, and the entire thing goes bright orange. It's like the granite has turned molten. It's molding itself around me, and I'm getting a lovely warm feeling of going home. And I thought, having a pint of beer with my favorite friends, and suddenly I look up, and there's all of these heads looking at me, and they went, that's pretty good. What do you mean? That's exactly 30 seconds. Literally, I got sent back round again. So someone's obviously got my best interest at stake. They know my weaknesses. And they go, no, you got a job here to do, little boy. Poof, off you go. Go and write something else. But the experience is incredible, and I've experienced it at least twice now. Without asking for it, demanding it, or even expecting it. And it has changed my life. It's helped me become the writer who I am, to understand what I'm doing so I can be a better teacher to people. If I can do it from experience, so much the better. But I still need to back it up with hard facts and stuff because it's too easy otherwise, I think. Maybe it's my Capricorn rising. I have to make it hard for myself. But I also want people who are sitting on the fence to read what I do and give them permission to be comfortable with what I'm doing. It's not a personal opinion I'm giving you. I'm giving you a fact, and I'm letting you choose from the facts that I'm giving you based on the experience. You can figure out whether it's right or wrong. I'm not telling you the truth. I'm telling you the fact. Okay, you can figure out if it's right or wrong. I don't care one way or the other. It's because otherwise it's just my truth that I'm just promoting. That's not going to help anybody because I'm on my own journey. But it is fascinating. It's the one thing I think that keeps me up at night, making a sense of all of these different little filaments that still haven't been connected, and understanding the true mystery of it all. And it is exciting because it's a never-ending spiral that has all kinds of little niches full of wonderful little things, little sweeties.
Yep, no doubt about it. Yeah, yeah. I had a spiritual experience in my home actually a couple of days ago on Monday of this week, which was pretty powerful. I woke up. It was 5:45 in the morning, 5:44 actually, because I checked my clock, and I woke up to a scream in my ear. Not like a scream, but yelling of a word. And it woke me up. It was really loud, as if someone was there and had just yelled in my ear. And this hasn't happened to me before. I haven't heard that kind of a thing. And it felt like it was there. It wasn't a part of a dream. It felt like it literally woke me up. And I couldn't make out what the word was. It was kind of like, it sounded like it was underwater kind of, but it was a male voice. And I told my wife, something just screamed in my ear. And then about 20 minutes later, our son came in, and he's 5 years old, and he came into our room and had just woke up, and he's like, "Guys, there's somebody walking around in my bedroom." He's like,
and they know.
Like, yeah, for sure. And he's like, I heard him walking, but I didn't see anybody, but somebody was there. And we're like, okay, that can't be a coincidence, that I heard this thing and that my son saw this thing. And at our old house, we had a bunch of paranormal experiences and things that can't be explained. But at our new house, and we've been there since 2017, we've had very little, almost nothing at our new house. And
kids before the age of 7, they still have one foot in the other world, so they do see both sides of the equation very easily.
He's very open. And we don't talk to him about ghosts or anything. It's not like a hot topic. I mean, he's watching normal movies and Paw Patrol and going to school and whatnot. But so this was the first thing that he'd brought to us that was in that realm. And so my wife and I checked the cameras in his room, because we have a little sleep cam or whatever, and we can talk to him through it and whatnot. And it actually, there was an orb that came underneath his door. Right when he was kind of, it was maybe 20 minutes before I heard the voice. So he continued to talk and toss and turn, after that and whatnot. But we see this orb coming in underneath the door, and it goes right onto his bed, like right up at his bed.
Yeah.
And he's like moving around on his bed, and it was very strange. I mean, to have those three coincidences all happen within a 30-minute period, basically, very, very strange. So when you said, one of the things you're talking about, you said little boy, and it just reminded me of my son and all this spiritual talk. I felt like compelled to share. But
there's little balls of light they're like spirit forms just moving away through our world. Usually they use the telluric currents as conveyor belts. I remember when I was filming my first documentary, I was in Salisbury Cathedral. I had exactly the same experience where I suddenly realized that there's certain things in the building that are out of proportion, or there's a certain miscalculation on the part of the architect, like a little nod on the wink that something's happening here that's different. And I thought, why do I get the feeling that it's all related to the chakras of the body? The chakras are hardwired into the nave of Salisbury Cathedral. And I had a film camera, and I saw this orb. It's about that big. It was purple, like the microphone, with a little vapor trail, like a fish tail. And it was moving at ankle height. And I said, "Hi, how's the filming going?" I said, "Hi, it's going great. Hi, how are you?" "Fine, follow me, I want to show you something." I went, "Okay." Of course, did I film the damn thing? No. I got the camera in my hand. And I looked over at a lady who had a son with him. I said, "Did you?" And she pulls the son closer to him, like a strange man. And I looked at the priest up in the pulpit. And I just said to him, I didn't say anything. I just pointed, and he goes, "Mm-hmm." And he opens the book. I said, "You see this all the time." I said, "I can't talk about it." Very nice. So I followed the orb and went back to the altar, and there's the crown of the building. Sun comes up at the equinox sunrise, and it's the only time you'll see this in Salisbury, is the revealing of a triptych of stained glass windows, which have the 3 archangels on them. But when the sun comes up, the whole window suddenly lights up, and you see a purple pyramid with the all-seeing eye, with a stake through the middle, 2 serpents going around the caduceus, and all the points of the chakras of the human body. And then when you look at the connection of the chakras in relationship to the architectural plan of the building, they meet exactly where the different parts of the building are. So the heart chakra is where the transept and the nave intersect, opening the heart. That's where the spire goes up to the sky. The choir, of course, is the throat chakra. The third eye is the altar, and the crown is where the good stuff happens. The only time I've ever seen that the architectural design was in Luxor in Egypt. Exactly the same thing happens there, but it was that little orb moving around. They're very mischievous. They have a good sense of humor, but I've never felt threatened by them. But I do get a sense they're very conscious, and they do communicate. So, great stories.
Yeah, it was interesting. So, I've had a good amount of experiences in my life, but I hadn't had one in 5 years or so.
That's cool.
I wanted to share it.
I call them the fringe benefits.
Yeah.
Doing this is hard work. It's difficult. You do lose a lot of friends. They think you've gone a little cuckoo, but the fringe benefits are incredible. I mean, when I was learning the crafts of understanding the invisible side of life with some very good teachers, we go to places to understand the context of the land. And then there's one place in Ireland where it was a mound where no one was originally buried. 80% of mounds, there's no one buried there. They're just marking the telluric current where it happens to be. But the Catholic Church built a cemetery on the spot, and we were told to go and clear the energy. People there didn't feel comfortable, so we had to move people back to the light, reset things. And we thought, that was a good bit of 20 minutes of work. And then I had my hand down by my side, and I felt a pressure on my finger. And I thought, what the hell? And there's a little entity holding on to my finger, and I pulled it up, and it starts complaining to put him down. Literally, it's like, okay, bit of an ego, this one. And it was this naked onion head guy with a big protruding belly with little sticks for legs and arms. And I thought, what the hell is this? And the channel that was next to me that was leading this teaching, she's laughing her head off because she can see him as bright as daylight. I can see him as bright as daylight. And I can feel him still holding my finger. And the rest of the group saying, what the hell are you laughing at? I said, can't you see this guy? And a little onion head, and he's looking at me like, don't you pick me up again. And we kept walking to the edge of the perimeter of the energy field of the mound. And then he just goes, biff, disappears. Because he can't cross into our reality. We're in his reality, or its reality, or the point in between the two. And that's where that magic is, but it can't come into ours. So, the fringe benefits are incredible. And again, if I hadn't done it, I think I would have been missing something important in life. I'm glad I didn't stick with advertising.
Yeah.
Or rock and roll.
Right.
Although I had hair back then, but we don't talk about that.
Right. Ryan did as well, I think. But,
oh, really?
Yeah.
You hear him complaining next door now.
Yes, yeah. Well, good. It's been amazing to chat with you, get to know you.
Thanks,
really,
Matt.
Yeah, really cool stuff. So really enjoyed it, and we should probably wrap it up. We're probably approaching 2.5-ish hours here, but enjoyed it. You got a plane to catch, and
I do, literally.
Yeah, you do. But thank you for making the trip down here. And
thanks for having me, Matt. Appreciate it.
For sure. Yeah, I got a little gift bag that I give all the guests, a little going away gift for you. But
can I take it for security?
Yeah, you will be able to take it through security. Yep,
excuse me, sir. Did you pack this bag? I don't know.
No, you didn't. But nothing flammable or sharp within the bag, so you should be good to go. So good stuff, man. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Yep. Awesome. We'll wrap with that.